I'm Alexis. I'm 22, fresh out of college and feeling like I'm on top of the world. My mom, Sarah, raised me on her own, working her butt off to give me everything I needed. My dad? Never met him, never cared to. At least that's what I always told myself. Graduation day rolls around, and I'm pumped beyond belief. My best friend, Jake, is in the crowd, cheering like a lunatic. Mom's in the front row, looking prouder than I've ever seen her. I stride across the stage, grab my diploma, and feel like I'm floating on air. But that's when things start getting weird. I notice this guy in the audience staring at me like he's just seen a ghost. At first, I brush it off, but after the ceremony, he makes a beeline straight for me. "Hey there, sweetheart, remember me?" I'm like, "Gosh, should I?" He gives this awkward grin and says, "I'm Tom, your dad." I swear my heart nearly stops. This guy, this total stranger, is claiming to be my long-lost father. Before I can even process it, he goes in for a hug. I backpedal so fast I almost trip over my gown. Whoa, hold on. What the hell? That's when Mom swoops in, looking angrier than I've ever seen her. "Tom, what are you doing here?" Tom throws up his hands, trying to act all innocent. "Sarah, come on. I just want to reconnect with my little girl. Make things right, you know." I'm standing there, feeling like I've stepped into an episode of The Twilight Zone. Jake slides up next to me and whispers, "You okay, Alex?" "Want me to get rid of this guy?" I shake my head, still trying to wrap my mind around what's happening. Part of me wants to tell Tom to get lost, but another part, I don't know. I'm torn. My whole life, I've wondered about my dad, and now here he is. Tom's still talking, spinning some sob story about how he's changed and wants to be a part of my life. Mom's not buying it, and honestly, I'm not sure I am either. "Look, Tom," I finally managed to say, finding my voice. "This is a lot to process. You can't just show up after 22 years and expect everything to be okay." He nods, looking genuinely sad. "I understand, Alexis. But maybe we could grab a coffee sometime, talk things out." I glance at Mom, who's shaking her head furiously, but curiosity is gnawing at me. What if he really has changed? What if this is my chance to finally have a dad? "I'll think about it," I mutter, not committing to anything. As Tom walks away, I'm left standing there with my diploma in hand, feeling like my world's been turned upside down. Jake puts an arm around me and Mom's looking worried sick. I'm torn between wanting to know more and wishing Tom had never shown up. One thing's for sure. My simple, straightforward life just got a whole lot more complicated, and I have no idea what I'm going to do next. A week after the graduation bombshell, I find myself sitting across from Tom. The place smells like burnt coffee and regret, kind of fitting for this messed up reunion. "So, Alexis, I bet you've got a million questions," Tom said, stirring his coffee like it held all the answers. "Yeah, like where the hell have you been for the past 22 years? I shot back. He sighed, looking genuinely regretful. "Your mom, she kept me away, said she didn't want me in your life." "Nonsense," I snapped. "Mom would never do that." "Look, sweetie, I know it's hard to believe, but—" "Don't call me sweetie. You lost that right when you bailed," I interrupted. Tom held up his hands in surrender. "Fair enough. I made mistakes, I admit it, but I'm here now, trying to make it right." I wanted to stay angry, but something in his eyes made me hesitate. Maybe it was the family I never had, or just plain curiosity, but I felt myself softening. "So, what? You want to play happy families now?" I asked, trying to keep my guard up. "Actually, I'd love for you to meet my family. My wife, Linda, and the kids, they're dying to meet their big sister." That hit me like a ton of bricks. You have other kids?" Tom nodded, pulling out his phone to show me pictures. There he was, arm around a pretty blonde, with 2 little kids grinning at the camera. They looked happy, like the family I never had. "They're cute," I mumbled, trying to ignore the jealousy gnawing at me. "They'd love to meet you. How about dinner tomorrow night?" Before I knew it, I found myself agreeing. The next evening, I found myself in Tom's suburban home, surrounded by the picture-perfect family I'd always dreamed of. Linda hugged me like we were long-lost friends. "Oh, Alexis, we've heard so much about you," Linda exclaimed warmly. "Funny, I can't say the same." I muttered under my breath, but forced a smile anyway. The kids, Tommy and Lily, bombarded me with questions about college and my life. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to imagine that this could be my life too. But then Tom dropped the bomb. "So, Alexis, I hate to bring up business, but I could really use your help." "My help?" I asked, caught off guard. Tom launched into a sob story about his failing business, how he was drowning in debt. If I could just get a small investment, say your graduation money, I could turn things around, provide for all of us. I nearly choked on my meatloaf. "You want my money?" "It's a great opportunity, honey. We could be partners," he said, his tone almost too eager. I felt a wave of nausea. Was this what it was all about? Linda looked uncomfortable, but the kids were blissfully oblivious. "I need to think about it," I stammered, making excuses to leave. Outside, I immediately called Jake and spilled everything. "Slow down, Lex. You're not seriously considering this, are you?" "I don't know, Jake. Maybe he's changed. Maybe this is my chance at a real family. Or maybe he's playing you. Look, do some digging before you do anything stupid, okay? I promised I would, but part of me didn't want to. What if I found something I didn't want to know?" But Jake's words nagged at me, so I started digging. And holy hell, did I find dirt. Tom wasn't just a deadbeat dad. He was a con artist with a string of abandoned families and fraud charges across 3 states. The deeper I dug, the sicker I felt. Staring at the evidence on my laptop, I couldn't believe how easily I'd fallen for his act. And worse, I had no idea how I was going to confront him. I knew I had to expose his whole operation, but first I needed to confront him face to face. Get him to admit his lies. So I called him up, playing it cool. "Hey Tom, can we meet up? I've been thinking about that investment opportunity." "Sure thing, princess. How about that diner again?" I gritted my teeth at the word princess, but played along. When I got there, Tom was all smiles, probably thinking he had me right where he wanted me. He thought he'd hit the jackpot. "So Alexis, have you made a decision?" he asked, leaning in eagerly. I slapped down a folder stuffed with all the dirt I'd dug up on him. "Yeah, I've decided you're a lying sack of crap." His face went pale. "What's this?" "Your greatest hits, Tom. Fraud, abandoned families, unpaid child support, ring any bells." He reached for the folder, but I yanked it back. Hands off. "Now, want to tell me the truth?" Tom's face crumpled, and he launched into another sob story about how life had been tough, how he'd made mistakes, but was trying to turn things around. "I just wanted to make things right with you, Alexis. Give you the father you never had." Damn him, but I felt a twinge of sympathy. And the money. That was just a bonus, right? He looked ashamed. "I admit I need help, but I swear, if you help me out, I'll pay you back. We can have a real relationship." Against every instinct screaming at me to run, I found myself agreeing to loan him $10,000. "But this is it, Tom. No more after this." He hugged me, tears in his eyes. "You won't regret this, sweetie, I promise." But I did. Over the next few weeks, Tom became a constant presence in my life, always needing something, more money, more time, more favors. "Alexis, honey, the business is really taking off. If we just had a little more capital." "Tom, I told you, I'm tapped out. I can't give you any more." He looked at me with hurt and disappointment. I thought we were building something here, a real father-daughter relationship. I felt terrible but stood my ground. Relationships aren't built on money, Tom. But the guilt gnawed at me. Was I being too hard on him? Maybe he really was trying to change. Then came the day I dropped by his house unannounced. I overheard Tom and Linda arguing in the kitchen. "I'm telling you, Linda, that girl's a gold mine. A few more sob stories and we'll have enough to pay off all our debts, and then some." "But Tom, she's your daughter," Linda protested. "Please, she's just another sucker born every minute, right?" I felt like I'd been blindsided by a truck. When I told my mom everything, she sighed. "Oh, honey, I was afraid this might happen. Tom's always been a user. It's why I kept him away from you." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, feeling a mix of betrayal and sadness. "I wanted to protect you. I guess I should have known you'd have to learn the hard way." Rage boiled up inside me. "Well, he's not getting away with it this time. I'm going to make him pay." That's when I called Jake. "Hey, remember when you hacked the school's grading system as a project? I've got a real project for you now." Jake was all in. We spent days creating a fake investment scheme, something so tempting Tom wouldn't be able to resist. But I wasn't stopping there. I tracked down contacts for Tom's other kids, the ones he'd abandoned over the years. Turns out, I had a lot of pissed off half-siblings out there. "Hey, this is Alexis. You don't know me, but we have something in common. A deadbeat dad named Tom. One by one, they agreed to be part of my plan. Tom had no idea what was coming for him. As I put the finishing touches on our trap, I felt a mix of excitement and dread. Was I really going through with this? Then I remembered Tom's words, just another sucker, and my resolve hardened. I called up Tom, putting on my best excited daughter voice. Hey Tom, I've got amazing news. Remember that tech startup my friend told me about? Their stock is about to go public, and I've got an in. We could make millions. Tom's voice practically dripped with greed. That's fantastic, sweetheart. How much do we need to invest? Well, that's the thing, I said. The minimum buy-in is $50,000. I was hoping maybe we could pool our resources. I don't know, Alexis. That's a lot of money, Tom replied, sounding hesitant. I played my trump card. I understand if you can't swing it. I just thought, as partners. But I guess I could ask Mom instead. No, I'll make it work, Tom said quickly. This is our chance, kiddo. We'll be rich. As Tom scrambled to get the cash together, Jake was hard at work, digging deeper into Tom's finances. Holy crap, Lex, this guy's been running scams for decades. I've got evidence of at least 5 other families he's conned. Perfect. Everything was falling into place. I organized a celebration dinner for our new partnership, inviting Linda, the kids, and a few surprise guests. On the night of the dinner, Tom was all smiles, probably already counting his imaginary millions. Linda looked nervous, and the kids were excited for cake. Before we celebrate, I have a surprise, I announced. I've invited some special guests. Tom, I believe you know them. In walked 5 people, my half-siblings. Tom's face went from confusion to panic. What is this, Alexis? What's going on? One by one, they shared their stories, tales of abandonment, broken promises, and stolen money. Linda's face grew more horrified with each revelation. Tom, is this true? All these children. Tom was sweating bullets. Now, honey, I can explain. Oh, I think you've explained enough. I cut him off. I cut in. But wait, there's more. I pulled out the files Jake had compiled, bank statements, fake business records, the whole works. You see, Tom here wasn't planning on investing anything. He was going to take my money and run, just like he's done to all of us. I can't believe this, Linda said, her voice trembling. We're leaving, Tom. Don't try to follow us. Tom lunged for her. Baby, please, it's not what it looks like. But it was too late. As Linda and the kids left, Tom turned on me, his face twisted with rage. You've ruined everything, he yelled. I stood my ground. No, Tom, you ruined everything yourself. I'm just making sure you can't do it to anyone else. What do you want from me? He asked, defeated. Your remaining assets will be distributed among your victims, and you'll sign over my $10,000. As he signed the papers, I felt no joy, only relief that it was finally over. In the aftermath, something unexpected happened. My half-siblings and I started talking, sharing our experiences. We formed a bond, a family of our own choosing. Mom welcomed them with open arms, joking, I always wanted a big family. As for me, I learned a valuable lesson. Blood doesn't make a family. Love, trust, and mutual respect do. Sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the one you're born into. The story's over now, but I have a question for you. If you were in my shoes, would you have given Tom a second chance or gone straight for revenge? Was I justified in exposing him, or should I have tried harder to build a relationship with my long-lost father? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'm dying to hear what you would have done in this messed-up family drama. If you enjoyed this wild ride, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that'll make you question everything about family, loyalty, and revenge. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.
The shrill ring of my phone pierced the silence of my office, making me jump. I glanced at the caller ID and felt my stomach knot. Patricia! My mother-in-law's name on the screen was enough to send a wave of dread through me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself before answering. Hello, Patricia, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Olivia, dear, her saccharine tone oozed through the speaker. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. I bit back a sarcastic response. Of course, she was interrupting. She always did. What can I do for you? I asked instead. Well, I was just wondering if you'd picked up Connor's dry cleaning yet. You know how he likes his shirts pressed just so for work. I closed my eyes, counting to 5 in my head. Patricia, I'm at work. Connor can pick up his own dry cleaning. Oh, Olivia, she tutted. A good wife takes care of these things. You wouldn't want Connor to look unprofessional, would you? Before I could respond, my office door opened. Ethan, my colleague, poked his head in. He mouthed, "Meeting in 5, and I nodded gratefully. I have to go, Patricia. I have a meeting. Of course, dear. We'll talk later about the dry cleaning. I hung up, feeling a headache brewing behind my eyes. Ethan lingered in the doorway, concern etched on his face. Everything okay? He asked. I forced a smile. Just the usual mother-in-law drama. Ethan shook his head. I don't know how you put up with it. You're a saint, Olivia. If only he knew. If only anyone knew the half of what I dealt with daily. I gathered my notes for the meeting, trying to push thoughts of Patricia out of my mind. As we walked to the conference room, Ethan leaned in. Hey, a bunch of us are going for drinks after work. Want to join? The offer was tempting, a chance to unwind, to be around people who actually appreciated me, but I knew what awaited me at home if I was late. I can't, I said, regret coloring my voice. Connor's expecting me. Ethan's disappointment was palpable, but he nodded understandingly. The meeting dragged on, but my mind was elsewhere. I thought about Connor, about how he'd react if he knew the truth about my job, about how much I really made. It was a secret I'd kept for years, partly out of habit, partly out of fear of Patricia's reaction. As I drove home that evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Connor. Mom's coming over for dinner. Pick up some wine? I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. Of course, Patricia was coming over. She always found a way to insert herself into our lives. I walked into our house, arms laden with groceries and the requested wine. The sound of Patricia's laughter drifted from the kitchen, along with the aroma of something burning. Olivia, dear, Patricia called out. We're in here. I'm just showing Connor how to properly cook a roast. The poor boy's been living off your attempts at cooking for far too long. I set the bags down, taking a moment to compose myself before entering the kitchen. Connor stood by the stove, looking lost, while Patricia fussed over a blackened piece of meat. Hi, honey, Connor said, giving me a quick peck on the cheek. Mom's teaching me how to cook. I forced a smile. That's great. I brought wine. Patricia clucked her tongue. Oh, Olivia, you know Connor prefers beer with his dinner. Wine is so pretentious. I felt something snap inside me. The stress of the day, the constant criticisms, it all came to a head. Actually, I said, my voice tight, I brought the wine for me. I think I'm going to need it. The kitchen fell silent. Connor looked bewildered, while Patricia's eyes narrowed. I knew I'd pay for that comment later, but for now, I savored the small victory. As I poured myself a generous glass of wine, I couldn't help but wonder how long I could keep living like this. Something had to give. And soon. I never imagined my life could get worse, but fate has a twisted sense of humor. It was a crisp Sunday morning when Connor dropped the bombshell. Honey, he said, his voice hesitant, Mom's lease is up, and she's having trouble finding a new place. I told her she could stay with us for a while. The mug I was holding slipped from my grasp, shattering on the kitchen floor. Coffee splattered everywhere, but I barely noticed. You did what? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Connor rushed to clean up the mess, avoiding my gaze. It's just temporary, Olivia. She's family. We can't leave her without a place to stay. I stood there, frozen, as the reality of the situation sank in. Patricia, living with us. The thought made me physically ill. When? I managed to ask. She's moving in today, Connor replied, still not meeting my eyes. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Connor practically sprinted to answer it, leaving me alone in the kitchen, surrounded by broken ceramic and spilled coffee. Patricia's voice floated through the house, saccharine sweet. Oh, Connor, darling! Thank you so much for this. You're such a good son. I took a deep breath, plastered on a fake smile, and went to greet my new housemate. The next few days were a blur of passive-aggressive comments and thinly veiled insults. Patricia had taken over our guest room, but her presence seemed to fill every corner of the house. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Patricia sauntered into the kitchen. Olivia, dear, she said, her tone dripping with false concern, don't you think those pants are a bit tight? A woman your age should be more mindful of her figure. I gripped the knife I was using to chop vegetables tighter. My pants are fine, Patricia, I said through gritted teeth. She tsked. If you say so, dear. I just worry about Connor. Men can be so easily tempted when their wives let themselves go. Before I could retort, Connor walked in. Something smells great, he said, oblivious to the tension. Patricia beamed at him. I was just giving Olivia some fashion advice. You know how I worry about you two. Connor laughed. Mom, you don't need to worry about us. Olivia and I are fine. I turned back to the stove, fighting back tears of frustration. We were not fine. We were far from fine. The next morning, I woke up to find Patricia rearranging our living room. She had moved all the furniture and was hanging new curtains. Patricia, I said, trying to keep my voice level, what are you doing? She turned, a picture of innocence. Oh, Olivia, I hope you don't mind. This room needed a woman's touch. It was so drab before. I closed my eyes, counting to 10. When I opened them, Patricia was still there, smiling that infuriating smile. This is my house, I said quietly. You can't just change things without asking. Patricia's smile faltered for a moment before returning full force. Don't be silly, dear. This is Connor's house too, and he loves what I've done with the place. As if on cue, Connor walked in. Wow, Mom, the room looks great. I felt something inside me snap. Without a word, I grabbed my keys and stormed out of the house. I found myself in the parking lot at work, not even remembering the drive. Ethan was just arriving, and his face lit up when he saw me. Olivia, what are you doing here on a Saturday? I burst into tears, the stress of the past few days finally overwhelming me. Ethan rushed over, concern etched on his face. Hey, he said softly, pulling me into a hug. What's wrong? Through my sobs, I managed to explain the situation. Ethan listened, his face growing darker with each word. Olivia, he said when I finished, you can't keep living like this. It's not healthy. I nodded, wiping my eyes. I know, but what can I do? She's Connor's mother. Ethan looked at me, his eyes intense. You have options, Olivia, more than you realize. As I stood there in the parking lot, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe Ethan was right. Maybe I did have options, and maybe it was time I started exploring them. The weeks that followed Patricia's move-in were a living nightmare. Every morning, I'd wake up hoping it had all been a bad dream, only to hear her shrill voice echoing through the house. Today was no different. Olivia, Patricia called from downstairs. Connor's shirts need ironing. I gritted my teeth, counting to 10 before responding. I'm getting ready for work, Patricia. Connor can iron his own shirts. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made my heart race. Patricia appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of disapproval. A good wife takes care of her husband, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. But I suppose that's too much to ask of you. Before I could retort, Connor appeared behind his mother. It's okay, Mom, I can do it myself. Patricia turned to him, all sweetness and light. Oh, honey, you shouldn't have to. That's what wives are for. I felt something snap inside me. That's it, I said, my voice low and dangerous. I'm leaving for work. Don't wait up. I brushed past them both, ignoring Connor's confused calls. As I slammed the front door behind me, I felt a mixture of relief and guilt. Relief to be away from Patricia's constant criticism, guilt for leaving Connor to deal with her alone. At work, I threw myself into my projects, desperate for any distraction. Ethan noticed my frazzled state and cornered me in the break room. Olivia, he said gently, you can't keep going on like this. You look exhausted. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I know, Ethan, but what can I do? She's always there, always criticizing, always undermining me. Ethan's eyes hardened. You need to stand up for yourself. Tell Connor how you feel. I laughed bitterly. I've tried. He just doesn't see it. To him, she's just being helpful. As I spoke, my phone buzzed with a text from Connor. Mom wants to know what's for dinner. She says your cooking could use some work. I showed Ethan the message, my hands shaking with anger. He read it, his face darkening. That's it, he said firmly. You're coming home with me tonight. You need a break from all this. Part of me wanted to protest, to be the dutiful wife and go home. But a larger part, the part that was tired of being belittled and ignored, nodded in agreement. I texted Connor back. Working late, order takeout. Ethan's apartment was small but cozy, a stark contrast to the tension-filled house I'd left behind. As we sat on his couch, nursing glasses of wine, I felt myself relax for the first time in weeks. Thank you, I said softly. I didn't realize how much I needed this. Ethan smiled, his eyes warm. Anytime, Olivia. You deserve so much better than what you're getting at home. As the night wore on, I found myself opening up to Ethan in a way I hadn't with anyone in years. I told him about my secret career success, about the constant pressure from Patricia, about Connor's indifference. "Why do you stay?" Ethan asked, his voice gentle but probing. I stared into my wine glass, searching for an answer. I don't know anymore. Just then, my phone exploded with notifications, missed calls and texts from Connor and Patricia. I scrolled through them, my heart sinking with each message. "Where are you? Mom's worried sick. How could you be so selfish? A good wife doesn't stay out all night." The last message made me see red. Without thinking, I dialed Connor's number. "Olivia?" he answered, his voice a mixture of relief and anger. "Where the hell are you?" "I'm safe," I said, my voice steady despite the anger coursing through me. "And I'm not coming home tonight." "What? But Mom," I cut him off. "No, Connor, not this time. I can't do this anymore. Your mother, your indifference, all of it. I'm done." As I hung up, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Ethan looked at me, a mixture of concern and admiration in his eyes. "What now?" he asked softly. I took a deep breath, feeling for the first time in years like I was in control of my own life. "Now," I said, "I start fighting back." The morning after my night at Ethan's, I returned home to face the music. As I stepped through the front door, the silence was deafening. Then, like a storm breaking, Patricia's voice rang out. "Well, look who finally decided to grace us with her presence," she sneered from the living room. Connor sat beside her, his face a mask of disappointment and confusion. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Patricia scoffed. "About your shameful behavior? I should say so." "No," I replied, looking directly at Connor. "About us, about this situation." Connor shifted uncomfortably. "Olivia, can't we just forget about last night? Mom was worried sick." I felt my resolve hardening. "No, Connor, we can't just forget. This isn't working. Your mother living here, her constant criticism, your indifference, it's killing me." Patricia stood up, her eyes flashing. "How dare you, after everything we've done for you?" I laughed bitterly. "Done for me? You've done nothing but tear me down since the day I married Connor." The argument escalated quickly, voices rising, accusations flying. In the heat of the moment, I revealed my secret. "You have no idea what I've sacrificed for this family," I shouted. "I'm the one who's been supporting us. My job, my success, it's all been for us." The room fell silent. Connor stared at me, shocked. Patricia's face contorted with a mixture of disbelief and anger. "What are you talking about?" Connor asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before I could respond, a wave of dizziness hit me. The room started to spin, and I felt my knees buckle. The last thing I heard was Connor calling my name as everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed, the steady beep of monitors filling the room. Ethan was by my side, concern etched on his face. "What happened?" I croaked, my throat dry. "You collapsed at home," Ethan explained softly. "Exhaustion and severe stress," the doctors said. "You've been out for a day." I closed my eyes, the memories flooding back. "Connor?" Ethan's expression darkened. "He was here earlier, left when I arrived." A nurse entered, checking my vitals. "Mrs. Thompson, how are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck," I admitted. She nodded sympathetically. "That's to be expected. Your body's been under extreme stress. You need rest and a major lifestyle change." As she left, Ethan took my hand. "Olivia, this can't go on. You're killing yourself." I nodded, tears welling up. "I know, but what can I do? It's my home, my marriage." "Is it worth your life?" Ethan asked gently. Before I could answer, the door opened. Connor walked in, looking haggard. His eyes narrowed when he saw Ethan. "Could you give us a minute?" he asked, his tone clipped. Ethan squeezed my hand before leaving, throwing a concerned glance over his shoulder. Connor sat in the chair Ethan had vacated. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice a mixture of hurt and anger. "About your job, about how you were feeling." I sighed, feeling drained. "Would you have listened? Every time I tried to talk about your mother, you dismissed my concerns." Connor ran a hand through his hair. "I never meant. I didn't realize." "That's the problem, Connor," I said softly. "You never realized. You never saw how much I was struggling." He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "What do we do now?" he asked. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in years I saw clearly. I saw a man who, despite his good intentions, had consistently chosen his mother over his wife, a man who had stood by while I was belittled and broken down. I don't know, I replied honestly, but I know I can't go back to the way things were. I won't survive it. Connor nodded slowly, a look of resignation crossing his face. And your colleague, Ethan? He's been a friend when I needed one, I said firmly. Nothing more. As Connor left, promising to return later, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. For the first time in years, I was putting myself first. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Things had to change, and they had to change now. After a week in the hospital, I returned home with a mix of dread and determination. The house was eerily quiet as I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing in the hallway. "Welcome back," Connor said, emerging from the kitchen. His voice was strained, the tension between us palpable. I nodded, unsure of what to say. The revelation of my financial success still hung in the air, unaddressed. "Where's Patricia?" I asked, dreading the answer. Connor sighed. "In the guest room. She's not happy," I snorted. "When is she ever?" As if summoned by our conversation, Patricia appeared at the top of the stairs. Her eyes narrowed as she saw me. "So the prodigal daughter-in-law returns," she sneered. "I hope you're proud of yourself, worrying us all like that." I felt my blood begin to boil. Proud? Of being worked to the point of collapse? Of being constantly belittled and criticized in my own home? Patricia descended the stairs, her face a mask of indignation. "How dare you? After everything we've done for you." "Enough, Mom," Connor interjected, but his voice lacked conviction. I laughed bitterly. "Everything you've done for me? You mean moving in uninvited? Criticizing my every move, making me feel worthless in my own home?" Patricia's face reddened. "I've only ever tried to help. It's not my fault you're so sensitive. But then again, what can we expect from someone with your background?" The room fell silent. Connor's eyes widened in shock. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. Patricia smirked, sensing she'd struck a nerve. "Well, dear, it's no secret that you come from, shall we say, humble beginnings. No wonder you struggle to be a proper wife. You never had a good example, did you?" I felt as if I'd been slapped. "How dare you bring my parents into this?" "Mom, that's enough," Connor said, but Patricia was on a roll. "It's the truth, isn't it? Your poor, deceased parents. What would they think of you now? Lying about your job, neglecting your wifely duties." Something inside me snapped. Years of pent-up frustration and anger came pouring out. "My parents would be proud of me," I shouted. "They taught me to work hard, to stand up for myself. They loved me unconditionally, something you clearly know nothing about." Patricia gasped, clutching her chest in mock offense. "Well, I never—" "No, you never." I cut her off. "You never cared about anyone but yourself. You've manipulated Connor his entire life, and now you're trying to do the same to me. But I won't let you. Not anymore." I turned to Connor, who stood frozen, his eyes darting between his mother and me. "Connor," I said, my voice shaking with emotion, "I can't do this anymore. I won't live like this. It's her or me." The silence that followed was deafening. Connor opened his mouth, then closed it again at a loss for words. Patricia recovered first. "Don't be ridiculous, Olivia. Connor would never choose you over his own mother." "Would you, darling?" Connor's lack of response was all the answer I needed. In that moment, I saw our entire marriage laid bare. Years of compromise, of putting everyone else's needs before my own, of slowly losing myself. "I see," I said quietly. The calm that washed over me was almost frightening. "Then I've made my decision." I walked past them both, heading for the stairs. Connor finally found his voice. "Olivia, wait, where are you going?" I paused, looking back at them. Patricia stood triumphant, while Connor looked lost and confused. "I'm packing my bags," I said. "I'm leaving." As I climbed the stairs, I heard Patricia's smug voice. "Good riddance, you'll be back, begging for forgiveness." But I knew I wouldn't. For the first time in years, I felt free. The road ahead was uncertain, but anything was better than staying in this toxic environment. As I threw clothes into a suitcase, I made a silent promise to myself. No more compromising my worth, no more letting others dictate my life. It was time to reclaim my independence, my self-respect, and my happiness. The Olivia who walked out of that house was not the same one who had entered it years ago. She was stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever came next, alone if necessary. I stood in the lobby of the law firm, my heart pounding. This was it. The point of no return. I'd spent the last week in a hotel, ignoring Connor's calls and texts, steeling myself for this moment. As I rode the elevator to the 15th floor, I replayed the events that led me here, each floor bringing a new memory of hurt and disappointment. The receptionist ushered me into a plush office where a stern-faced woman sat behind an imposing desk. "Mrs. Thompson," she greeted, gesturing for me to sit. "I'm Margaret Winters. You're here to discuss divorce proceedings?" I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. "Yes, I can't continue in my marriage." As we discussed the details, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. This was the end of a chapter in my life, but also the beginning of a new one. Halfway through our meeting, my phone buzzed incessantly. Connor's name flashed on the screen. I silenced it, but the interruption had shaken me. "Is everything all right?" Margaret asked, her eyes sharp. I took a deep breath. "Yes, it's just my husband. He doesn't know I'm here." Margaret's expression softened slightly. "Mrs. Thompson, are you sure about this? Divorce is a big step." "I'm sure," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I can't live like this anymore." As we wrapped up the meeting, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Ethan. "Olivia, where are you?" "Connor's here at the office looking for you. He seems really upset." My blood ran cold. How did Connor know where I worked? I'd always kept my job a secret from him and Patricia. "I have to go," I told Margaret abruptly, gathering my things. I rushed out of the office, my mind racing. As the elevator descended, I tried to calm my nerves. What was Connor doing at my workplace? How much did he know? The doors opened, and I stepped into the lobby, only to come face to face with Connor and Patricia. "Olivia," Connor said, his voice a mixture of relief and anger. "What's going on? Where have you been?" I stood my ground despite the urge to run. "I told you, Connor, I'm leaving. I can't do this anymore." Patricia stepped forward, her eyes flashing. "Don't be ridiculous, Olivia. You're coming home with us right now." "No, I'm not," I said firmly. "I'm done letting you control my life." Connor looked bewildered. "Control your life? Olivia, what are you talking about?" I laughed bitterly. "You really don't see it, do you? How your mother has manipulated every aspect of our marriage, how you've always chosen her over me." "That's not true," Connor protested weakly. "Isn't it?" I challenged. "Then why are you here with her instead of coming to find me on your own?" Connor fell silent, and I saw a flicker of realization in his eyes. Patricia, sensing she was losing control, changed tactics. "Olivia, dear, we're just worried about you. You've been acting so strangely lately. Is it stress from work? Maybe you should take some time off." "My work is not the problem," I said, my voice rising. "My work is the only thing that's kept me sane. Do you want to know the truth, Connor? I'm the one who's been supporting us. My job, my success, it's all been for us, and you never even noticed." The lobby fell silent. Connor's face paled, while Patricia looked like she'd been slapped. What do you mean?" Connor stammered. I took a deep breath, years of pent-up frustration pouring out. "I mean that while you've been letting your mother run our lives, I've been working my way up in my career. I'm a senior executive now, Connor. I make 3 times what you do. And I've kept it a secret because I knew Patricia would find a way to use it against me, to make me feel small and insignificant like she always does." Patricia's face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful little—" "No," I cut her off. "I'm done being grateful for your abuse. I'm done pretending everything is fine when it's not. I'm filing for divorce, Connor. It's over." As I turned to leave, Connor grabbed my arm. "Olivia, please. We can work this out. I had no idea." I pulled away, tears stinging my eyes. "That's the problem, Connor. You never had any idea, and now it's too late." I walked out of the lobby, leaving Connor and Patricia standing there, shocked and silent. As I stepped into the sunlight, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt free. The days following my confrontation with Connor and Patricia were a blur of legal meetings and emotional upheaval. I threw myself into work, grateful for the distraction. Ethan had been a rock, offering support without pushing for more. One evening, as I was leaving the office, my phone rang. Patricia's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Olivia." Her voice was uncharacteristically soft. "We need to talk, please." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a nearby cafe. As I walked in, I saw her sitting alone, looking smaller and older than I remembered. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. I nodded, wary. What do you want, Patricia? She took a deep breath. I want you to reconsider the divorce. Connor is devastated. I made mistakes, but surely we can work this out. I laughed bitterly. Work it out? After years of your manipulation and Connor's indifference? It's too late for that. Patricia's eyes flashed with a familiar anger, but she quickly composed herself. Olivia, be reasonable. Think about what you're giving up. The stability, the family. The abuse? I cut in. The constant criticism? The feeling of never being good enough? I was trying to help, Patricia protested. I only wanted what was best for Connor, for both of you. I shook my head. No, Patricia, you wanted control. You wanted to keep Connor dependent on you and me in my place. Patricia's facade cracked. And what's so wrong with that? I raised Connor. I know what's best for him. You're just some girl who wormed her way into his life. I'm his wife, I snapped, my voice rising. Or at least, I was. I loved him, supported him, built a life with him, and you couldn't stand it. Patricia leaned forward, her voice low and urgent. Listen to me, Olivia. You don't understand what you're doing. Connor, he's not as strong as you think. He needs me. He needs us. Suddenly I understood. This isn't about Connor at all, is it? It's about you. You're afraid of losing the lifestyle my income provides. Patricia's face paled. That's not true. I just want what's best for my son. No, I said, feeling a strange calm settle over me. You want what's best for you. You've always used Connor as an excuse to control everything around you, but it ends now. I stood up, ready to leave, but Patricia grabbed my arm. You can't do this. You have no idea what you're giving up. The money, the status. I pulled away, my voice steady. I earned that money, Patricia. I built that status. And I did it all while you and Connor belittled and ignored me. I don't need either of you to be successful. Patricia's desperation turned to anger. You ungrateful little bitch. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? By abandoning my son? The cafe fell silent, all eyes on us. I felt a lifetime of pent-up emotions bubbling to the surface. Done for me? I said, my voice dangerously low. You've done nothing but tear me down since the day I married Connor. You've criticized my cooking, my housekeeping, my career. You've manipulated Connor against me at every turn. And now you have the audacity to act like I owe you something? Patricia stood up, her face red with rage. You'll regret this, Olivia. You think you can just walk away? I'll make sure you lose everything in this divorce. Everything. I laughed, a sound that surprised even me. Go ahead and try, Patricia. I'm not afraid of you anymore. As I turned to leave, Patricia called out one last time. He'll never let you go, you know. Connor will fight this divorce every step of the way. I paused at the door, looking back at the woman who had made my life hell for so long. Then let him fight. I'm done being the victim in this story. Walking out of that cafe, I felt lighter than I had in years. The road ahead would be difficult, I knew that. But for the first time, I was ready to face it on my own terms. No more compromises, no more sacrifices. It was time to reclaim my life, whatever the cost. 6 months after my confrontation with Patricia, I stood in my new apartment, surrounded by boxes and the promise of a fresh start. The divorce had been finalized last week, and despite Connor's initial threats, it had gone smoother than I'd expected. My financial success had been my ace in the hole, leaving Patricia and Connor with no leverage. As I unpacked, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. Hey, I answered, a smile in my voice. How's the unpacking going? He asked. Slowly but surely, I replied. Want to come over and help? There was a pause. Actually, I'm already outside your building. I brought dinner. My heart skipped a beat. Ethan had been a constant support throughout the divorce, but we'd kept things strictly platonic. Until now. I buzzed him up, suddenly nervous. As I opened the door, I saw Ethan standing there, holding takeout bags and wearing a hesitant smile. I hope this is okay, he said. I pulled him into a hug. It's more than okay. As we ate, sitting on boxes because I hadn't unpacked my furniture yet, Ethan filled me in on the office gossip. Apparently, my divorce and subsequent promotion had caused quite a stir. Oh, and you'll never guess who I saw today, Ethan said, his tone cautious. I raised an eyebrow. Who? Connor and Patricia. They were at the bank, looking pretty stressed. I felt a twinge of something. Not regret exactly, but a complex mix of emotions. How did they look? Ethan hesitated. Not great. Connor looked like he hadn't slept in days, and Patricia, well, she's definitely not living the high life anymore. I nodded, processing this information. Part of me felt a grim satisfaction, but another part felt an unexpected pang of sadness. Olivia, Ethan said softly, are you okay? I took a deep breath. You know what? I really am. For the first time in years, I feel free. Ethan reached out, taking my hand. You deserve to be happy, Olivia. You've been through so much. As I looked into his eyes, I felt a warmth I hadn't experienced in a long time. But before I could respond, my phone rang. It was Connor. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? Olivia Connor's voice was strained. I need your help. I closed my eyes, steeling myself. What is it, Connor? It's Mom. She's not doing well. The stress of everything, it's taken a toll on her health. We can't afford her medical bills, and I don't know what to do. I felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Anger at the audacity of him asking for help after everything. Pity for Patricia's situation. And a strange sense of power, knowing I held their fate in my hands. Connor, I said, my voice steady, I'm sorry about Patricia's health, but I can't help you, not anymore. But Olivia? No, Connor, you and Patricia made your choices. Now you have to live with them, just like I had to live with the consequences of your actions for years. There was a long silence. Then, I understand. I'm sorry, Olivia, for everything. As I hung up, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The last tie to my old life had been severed. Ethan was watching me, concern etched on his face. Everything okay? I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. Yes, everything is finally okay. I stood up, pulling Ethan with me. Come on, help me unpack these boxes. I think it's time to start filling this new life with some happy memories. As we worked side by side, laughing and sharing stories, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road had been long and painful, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and truly free. Patricia and Connor's downfall wasn't a victory to celebrate, but a reminder of the importance of independence and self-respect. And as I looked at Ethan, I saw the possibility of a future filled with mutual respect and genuine love. This was my new chapter, my fresh start, and for the first time in years, I was excited about what the future held. The woman who had entered that toxic marriage years ago was gone. In her place stood a stronger, more confident Olivia, ready to face whatever life threw her way. As night fell and the last box was unpacked, I stood at my window, looking out at the city lights. I was no longer Connor's wife or Patricia's daughter-in-law. I was just Olivia. And that, I realized, was more than enough. The shrill voice of my mother-in-law pierced through the kitchen, making me flinch. Grace, what on earth have you done to my antique china? I turned slowly, my heart pounding. Olivia stood in the doorway, her face contorted with rage, holding up a delicate teacup with a hairline crack running along its rim. I'm sorry, Olivia. I was just trying to what? Destroy a family heirloom? She marched towards me, her heels clicking ominously on the tile floor. This set has been in the family for generations, and you managed to ruin it in less than a month of marriage. I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. It was an accident, a simple slip of the hand while washing up after our weekly family dinner, but I knew better than to argue with Olivia when she was in one of her moods. I'll replace it, I offered weakly. Olivia let out a harsh laugh. Replace it? You can't replace history, you foolish girl. This is exactly why I told Daniel he shouldn't have married you. You don't understand our family, our traditions. The words stung like a slap. I'd only been married to Daniel for a few weeks, and already his mother seemed determined to drive a wedge between us. I searched desperately for my husband, hoping he'd come to my defense, but he was nowhere to be seen. Mom? A softer voice called from the hallway. What's going on? Amelia, Daniel's younger sister, appeared in the doorway. Her eyes darted between Olivia and me, taking in the tense scene. Olivia's demeanor changed instantly. Oh, nothing to worry about, dear. Grace just had a little accident with the china. You know how clumsy she can be. I bit my lip, fighting back a retort. Amelia shot me a sympathetic look before addressing her mother. I'm sure it was an accident. Why don't we all calm down and... Calm down? Olivia's voice rose again. This isn't the first time she's shown complete disregard for our family's heritage. Remember the incident with your grandmother's brooch? My cheeks burned at the memory. I'd accidentally knocked the brooch off Olivia's dressing table while helping to clean. It had fallen behind a heavy chest of drawers, and we'd spent hours searching for it. When we finally found it, Olivia had acted as if I'd deliberately hidden it. That was different, Amelia protested. Grace was just trying to help. Help! Ha! Olivia snorted. She's been nothing but a disruption since the day Daniel brought her home. I knew she wasn't right for this family. I couldn't take it anymore. Olivia, please. I never meant to. Save your excuses, she snapped. I've heard enough of them. You'll never truly be a part of this family, Grace. The sooner you realize that, the better. With that, she stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me stunned and hurt. Amelia approached, placing a comforting hand on my arm. Don't listen to her, she said softly. Mom's always been hard on the women who marry into the family. It's not just you. I looked at her, surprised. What do you mean? Amelia glanced towards the door, then leaned in closer. There's something you should know about Mom's past. It might explain why she's so difficult. Before she could continue, Daniel's voice called from the living room. Grace? Mom? Is everything okay? Amelia squeezed my arm. We'll talk later, she whispered, then raised her voice. Everything's fine, Dan. We're just cleaning up. As we busied ourselves with the dishes, my mind raced. What secret was Amelia about to reveal, and how would it affect my already strained relationship with Olivia? I had a sinking feeling that the broken teacup was just the beginning of a much larger storm brewing in our family. As I carefully wrapped the remaining china, I couldn't shake the sense that my life was about to become far more complicated than I ever imagined. I paced our bedroom, my nerves frayed from the confrontation with Olivia. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, his face a mix of concern and frustration. Honey, I'm sure Mom didn't mean... Don't, I cut him off, my voice sharper than I intended. Don't make excuses for her, Daniel. You weren't there. You didn't hear the things she said. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know my mother can be difficult, but she's family, Grace. We have to find a way to make this work. I whirled to face him, anger bubbling up inside me. Make it work? Daniel, she told me I'd never be part of this family. How am I supposed to make that work? Before he could respond, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my brother, Victor. Everything okay, sis? You seemed upset earlier. I hesitated, then typed back. Can you talk? Of course, came the immediate reply. I turned to Daniel. I need some air. I'm going for a walk. He stood, reaching for me. Grace, please, let's talk about this. But I was already heading for the door, grabbing my jacket on the way out. The cool evening air hit me as I stepped outside, and I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Victor answered on the first ring. What's going on, Gracie? As I walked, I poured out everything that had happened with Olivia, from the broken teacup to her cruel words. Victor listened patiently, only interrupting to ask for clarification. She sounds like a real piece of work, he said when I finished. Have you talked to Daniel about this? I sighed, kicking at a pebble on the sidewalk. I've tried, but he always defends her. Says I need to be more understanding. Understanding of what? Her being a complete witch to you? Despite everything, I couldn't help but laugh. Victor. I'm serious, Grace. You don't deserve to be treated like this. Maybe it's time to set some boundaries. I slowed my pace, considering his words. But how? Daniel's so close to his family, I don't want to come between them. You're not the one coming between them, Victor said firmly. Olivia is. And if Daniel can't see that, maybe he needs a wake-up call. As we talked, a plan began to form in my mind. It was risky, but if it worked... Thanks, Victor, I said, feeling more determined than I had in weeks. I think I know what I need to do. When I returned home, I found Daniel in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee. He looked up as I entered, his expression wary. Feel better? He asked. I nodded, taking a deep breath. Daniel, we need to talk about your mother. He started to protest, but I held up a hand. Please, just listen. I love you, and I want our marriage to work, but I can't keep pretending everything's okay when it's not. Your mother's behavior is tearing us apart, and if we don't address it now, I'm afraid of what might happen. Daniel's face softened. I know it's been tough, Grace, but what can we do? She's my mother. And I'm your wife, I said, my voice steady. We need to present a united front. The next time she says something hurtful, I need you to stand up for me. Can you do that? He hesitated, and for a moment I feared I'd pushed too far, but then he nodded slowly. You're right, I should have done that from the beginning. I'm sorry, Grace. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. Just then, Daniel's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and grimaced. "It's Mom," he said. I felt my stomach clench. "Answer it," I said, steeling myself. "Put it on speaker." Daniel hesitated, then hit the answer button. Olivia's voice filled the kitchen, shrill and angry. "Daniel, you need to talk some sense into that wife of yours. Do you know what she's done now?" I met Daniel's eyes, silently urging him to remember his promise. He took a deep breath, and I held mine, waiting to see what would happen next. The crisp December air nipped at my cheeks as Daniel and I pulled into his parents' driveway. Christmas lights twinkled merrily, a stark contrast to the knot of dread in my stomach. "Remember what we talked about," I whispered, squeezing Daniel's hand. He nodded, his jaw set. "United front, I've got your back, Grace." As we approached the front door, I recalled my mother Sophia's words from our phone call earlier. "Kill them with kindness, sweetie. Don't let her get under your skin." Easier said than done, I thought, as Olivia flung open the door. "There you are," she exclaimed, embracing Daniel while barely acknowledging me. Come in, come in. I've prepared all your favorites, Daniel." We followed her into the living room where Alexander, Daniel's father, greeted us warmly. "Grace, my dear, you look lovely," he said, giving me a gentle hug. "Thank you, Alexander," I replied, grateful for his kindness. Olivia's eyes narrowed. "Grace, be a dear and help me in the kitchen, won't you?" I glanced at Daniel, who gave me an encouraging nod. Taking a deep breath, I followed Olivia. The moment we were alone, her demeanor changed. "I hope you're not planning on ruining Christmas like you ruined Thanksgiving," she hissed, thrusting a bowl of potatoes at me. "I'm not sure what you mean, Olivia," I said, keeping my voice steady as I began peeling. She snorted. "Don't play innocent. Your little stunt with the china was just the beginning, wasn't it? Now I hear you've been filling Daniel's head with nonsense about me." I focused on the potatoes, willing myself to stay calm. Daniel and I have simply been communicating honestly about our feelings. "Your feelings?" Olivia's voice dripped with disdain. "What about my feelings? My son was perfectly happy before you came along." Before I could respond, Daniel appeared in the doorway. "Everything okay in here?" Olivia's face transformed instantly. "Of course, darling, Grace and I were just catching up." I met Daniel's eyes, silently pleading. He cleared his throat. "Mom, can I talk to you for a moment?" "Alone?" As they left, I leaned against the counter, my hands shaking. I couldn't keep doing this. The constant tension, the two-faced behavior, it was too much. Suddenly, Amelia burst into the kitchen, her eyes wide. "Grace, you need to come quickly. Mom and Dan are really going at it." Heart racing, I followed her to the study. Through the closed door, I could hear raised voices. "She's my wife, Mom. You need to treat her with respect." "Respect? She's tearing this family apart, and you're too blind to see it. The only one tearing this family apart is you." The door flew open, and Olivia stormed out, her face flushed with anger. She stopped short when she saw me. "You," she snarled. "This is all your fault. You've turned my own son against me." Before I could react, she raised her hand and slapped me hard across the face. The room fell silent. I stood there, stunned, my cheek stinging. Daniel rushed to my side while Alexander appeared, looking horrified. "Olivia," he thundered, "what on earth has gotten into you?" She turned to her husband, her eyes wild. "Can't you see what she's doing? She's destroying everything." Alexander shook his head, his expression a mix of disappointment and anger. "The only one destroying anything is you, Olivia. I think it's time you left." "Left?" she screeched. "This is my house." "Not anymore," Alexander said firmly. "Not until you can behave like a civilized human being." As Olivia's protests grew louder, I slipped away, finding myself in the guest bathroom. I stared at my reflection, my cheek red and throbbing. A soft knock startled me. "Grace?" It was Amelia. "Are you okay?" I opened the door, fighting back tears. Amelia's eyes widened as she saw my face. "Oh, Grace," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, but there's something you need to know, something about why Mom is like this." I looked at her, curiosity overriding my pain. "What is it?" Amelia took a deep breath. "It's about what happened to her when she first married Dad, the real reason she hates all the women who marry into this family." As she began to speak, I realized that the truth behind Olivia's behavior was far more shocking than I could have ever imagined. My head was spinning from Amelia's revelation about Olivia's past. I stumbled out of the bathroom, desperate for fresh air and a moment to process everything. The living room was a battleground of raised voices and accusations. I couldn't bear it anymore. "I need some air," I muttered to Daniel, who was locked in a heated argument with his mother. He barely nodded, too engrossed in the family drama unfolding. I slipped out the front door, gulping in the crisp winter air. My cheek still stung from Olivia's slap, a constant reminder of how quickly things had escalated. As I paced the driveway, my bladder reminded me of its urgent need. I'd been so caught up in the chaos that I'd forgotten my initial reason for heading to the bathroom. I glanced back at the house, the muffled sounds of arguing still audible. There was no way I was going back in there. Desperate times called for desperate measures. I scanned the neighborhood, my eyes landing on a quaint house across the street. Before I could second-guess myself, I was hurrying across the road, praying the neighbors were home and in a charitable mood. I rang the doorbell, shifting from foot to foot. An elderly woman answered, her kind face creasing with concern as she took in my flustered appearance. "I'm so sorry to bother you," I blurted out. "I'm visiting family across the street, and there's been a situation. Would you mind terribly if I used your bathroom?" The woman, introducing herself as Mrs. Henderson, ushered me in without hesitation. As I followed her to the bathroom, a plan began to form in my mind. I needed proof of Olivia's behavior, something concrete that Daniel and Alexander couldn't ignore. After using the facilities, I pulled out my handkerchief, a delicate, monogrammed piece that had been a wedding gift from Olivia, of all people. With a silent apology to Mrs. Henderson for my deception, I deliberately left it on the sink counter. Returning to the living room, I found Mrs. Henderson waiting with a cup of tea. "You look like you could use this, dear," she said gently. I accepted gratefully, realizing I had an opportunity here. "Thank you. It's been a difficult day with my mother-in-law," I began, carefully choosing my words. Mrs. Henderson nodded sympathetically. "Family can be challenging, especially during the holidays." "You have no idea," I said, seizing the moment. "My mother-in-law, she's been, well, cruel, to put it mildly. Today, she even struck me." Mrs. Henderson's eyes widened in shock. "Oh, you poor thing, that's terrible." I nodded, fighting back real tears. "I'm at a loss. My husband tries to support me, but he's caught in the middle. I just don't know what to do anymore." As we talked, I shared more details about Olivia's behavior, painting a clear picture of the abuse I'd endured. Mrs. Maud Henderson listened attentively, her expression growing more concerned by the minute. Finally, I glanced at my watch, feigning surprise. "Oh, I should get back. They'll be wondering where I am." I stood, then patted my pockets. "Oh no, I think I left my handkerchief in your bathroom. Would you mind if I go grab it?" "Of course, dear. Go right ahead." I hurried to the bathroom, making a show of looking for the handkerchief. "That's strange," I called out. "I can't seem to find it. It must have fallen somewhere." Mrs. Henderson appeared in the doorway. "Don't worry about it, honey. If I find it, I'll bring it over to you. Which house are you in?" I described Olivia and Alexander's house, thanking her profusely. As I left, I felt a twinge of guilt for my manipulation, but I pushed it aside. I needed allies, and more importantly, I needed witnesses. Crossing back to Olivia's house, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what awaited me inside. I had set a plan in motion, one that could either salvage my relationship with my in-laws or destroy it completely. As I reached for the door handle, I heard Olivia's shrill voice from inside. "Where is that ungrateful girl? Daniel, go find your wife this instant." My hand froze on the doorknob. This was it, the moment of truth. Whatever happened next would change everything. With one last deep breath, I pushed open the door, ready to face whatever storm awaited me. I stepped into the house, bracing myself for the storm. But instead of Olivia's expected onslaught, I was met with a scene of utter chaos. Amelia and Olivia were locked in a fierce argument, their voices echoing through the halls. "How dare you defend her?" Olivia shrieked, her face contorted with rage. "After everything I've done for this family." Amelia stood her ground, her usually gentle demeanor replaced by steely determination. "What you've done? You mean tearing us apart with your cruelty and manipulation?" I froze in the doorway, unsure whether to intervene or retreat. Daniel caught sight of me and rushed over, his face etched with worry. "Grace, where have you been? I was about to come looking for you." Before I could respond, Olivia's sharp voice cut through the air. "Oh, look who's decided to grace us with her presence," she sneered. "Come to cause more trouble, have you?" I opened my mouth to defend myself, but Amelia beat me to it. "Enough, Mom. Can't you see what you're doing? You're pushing everyone away with your behavior." Olivia's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Don't you dare take her side, Amelia. I'm your mother." "And Grace is my sister-in-law," Amelia shot back. "She's family too, whether you like it or not." The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Alexander, who had been watching the scene unfold with a mixture of shock and dismay, finally spoke up. "Olivia, this has gone too far. Your treatment of Grace is unacceptable." Olivia whirled on her husband, her voice dripping with venom. "Oh, so you're against me too? After all these years?" I watched in stunned silence as the family I had married into unraveled before my eyes. The weight of guilt pressed down on me. Was I really the cause of all this? Suddenly, Amelia turned to me, her eyes blazing with a mix of anger and determination. "Grace, there's something you need to know. Something I should have told you a long time ago." Olivia lunged forward, grabbing Amelia's arm. "Don't you dare!" But Amelia shook her off, her voice rising above the chaos. "Mom was treated horribly by her own mother-in-law when she first married Dad. It was so bad that she almost left him." The room fell silent once more, all eyes turning to Olivia. For a moment, I saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes, quickly replaced by her usual mask of anger. "That has nothing to do with this," she hissed. "It has everything to do with this," Amelia insisted. "You swore you'd never be like her, but look at what you're doing to Grace. You've become the very thing you hated." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Suddenly, Olivia's behavior, while still inexcusable, took on a new dimension. I found myself torn between empathy for her past pain and anger at her present actions. Daniel stepped forward, his voice quiet but firm. "Mom, is this true?" Olivia's facade cracked, tears welling in her eyes. For a moment I saw a glimpse of the hurt, scared woman beneath the harsh exterior. But then, as quickly as it had appeared, the vulnerability vanished. Olivia straightened, her eyes hardening once more. "I've had enough of this," she declared. "If you all want to side with her, fine. But don't expect me to stand by and watch her destroy this family." With that, she stormed out of the room, leaving us all in stunned silence. Amelia turned to me, her eyes filled with remorse. "I'm so sorry, Grace. I should have told you sooner. Maybe things wouldn't have gotten this bad." I shook my head, still processing everything I'd learned. "It's not your fault, Amelia. But what do we do now?" Daniel wrapped an arm around me, his voice resolute. "We stand together. No more letting Mom get away with this behavior." As I looked around at the faces of my in-laws, Daniel's unwavering support, Amelia's fierce loyalty, Alexander's dawning realization, I knew we had reached a turning point. The next steps we took would either heal this family or break it apart for good. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "I think it's time we all had an honest conversation about the future of this family," I said, my voice stronger than I felt, "and about what role Olivia will play in it." The weight of my words hung in the air, and I knew that whatever happened next would change everything. But for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a glimmer of hope. We were finally facing the truth, and maybe, just maybe, we could find a way forward together. The tension in the room was suffocating as we all stood in stunned silence following Olivia's dramatic exit. I could feel the weight of unspoken words and hidden truths pressing down on us. It was time to lay everything bare. "I have something you all need to hear," I said, my voice trembling slightly as I pulled out my phone. Daniel looked at me quizzically. "Grace, what are you talking about?" I took a deep breath. "I've been recording Olivia's voicemails for the past few months. I think you need to hear what she's really been saying when you're not around." As I played the first message, Olivia's venomous words filled the room. "Listen here, you little homewrecker. I don't care what Daniel says. You'll never be part of this family. I'll make sure of that." The color drained from Daniel's face as message after message played, each one more cruel and threatening than the last. Alexander sank into a chair, his head in his hands, while Amelia's eyes filled with tears. "I had no idea," Daniel whispered, his voice hoarse. "Grace, why didn't you tell me it was this bad?" Before I could answer, a knock at the door startled us all. Alexander went to answer it, and to my shock, Mrs. Henderson from across the street stood there, my handkerchief in her hand. "I'm sorry to intrude," she said, her kind eyes filled with concern. "But I found this, and I wanted to make sure you were all right, dear." She looked directly at me, and I felt a rush of gratitude for this unexpected ally. As Mrs. Henderson stepped into the house, she took in the tense scene before her. "Is everything okay here?" she asked, her gaze lingering on my still red cheek where Olivia had slapped me. Suddenly, Olivia's voice rang out from behind us. "What is she doing here?" she demanded, glaring at Mrs. Henderson. The elderly neighbor stood her ground. "I came to return something to Grace and to make sure she's safe. After what she told me about how you've been treating her, I was worried." Olivia's face contorted with rage. "You've been gossiping about our family to the neighbors?" she shrieked at me. "How dare you?" She lunged towards me, but Daniel stepped between us. "That's enough, Mom," he shouted. "We've all heard the voicemails. We know the truth now." Olivia's eyes darted around the room, taking in the shocked and angry faces of her family. For a moment, I saw fear flicker across her features. "You don't understand," she said, her voice suddenly small. "I was just trying to protect our family." "By terrorizing Grace?" Amelia shot back. "By making her feel unwelcome and unloved? That's not protection, Mom. That's cruelty." Alexander finally spoke up, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Olivia, I think it's time you left. We all need some space to process this." Olivia's face crumpled. "You're choosing her over me? Your own wife?" "We're choosing kindness and decency," Daniel said firmly. "Something you seem to have forgotten." As Olivia stormed out of the house for the second time that day, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. The truth was finally out, but at what cost? Mrs. Henderson patted my arm gently. "You did the right thing, dear. No one deserves to be treated that way." As she left, promising to be there if we needed anything, I turned to face my in-laws. The room was thick with unspoken emotions. Shock, anger, betrayal, and underneath it all, a glimmer of hope. Daniel pulled me close, his arms strong and comforting. "I'm so sorry, Grace. I had no idea how bad it really was. But I promise you, things are going to change." I looked up at him, then at Amelia and Alexander. "Where do we go from here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Alexander straightened, a look of determination on his face. "We heal, we move forward, and we do it together as a family." As we stood there, united in our resolve, I realized we had reached a turning point. The worst was over, but the hardest part, rebuilding our family without Olivia, was just beginning. And I knew, deep in my heart, that this was a challenge we would face head-on, together. The days following the confrontation with Olivia were a blur of tense conversations and sleepless nights. Daniel and I sat at our kitchen table, the weight of our decision hanging heavy in the air between us. "Are we really doing this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Daniel reached across the table, taking my hand in his. "We have to, Grace. After everything she's done, we can't keep her in our lives. It's not healthy for anyone." Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Amelia. "Mom's on her way to your place. She's not taking the news well. Be prepared." My heart raced as I showed Daniel the message. We'd barely had time to process our decision to cut ties with Olivia. Now she was coming here. The doorbell rang, making us both jump. Daniel squeezed my hand. "We're in this together," he said firmly. As we opened the door, Olivia burst in, her eyes wild and her voice shrill. "How dare you?" she screamed. "After everything I've done for this family, you're just going to throw me away?" I stood my ground, drawing strength from Daniel's presence beside me. "Olivia, your behavior has been unacceptable. We can't continue like this." She turned to Daniel, her voice suddenly pleading. "Sweetheart, you can't mean this. She's turned you against me. Can't you see that?" Daniel shook his head. "No, Mom. Grace hasn't turned me against you. Your own actions have done that." Olivia's face contorted with rage. She lunged forward, her hand raised as if to strike me again. But this time, I was ready. I caught her wrist midair, my voice steady as I said, "Not again, Olivia. Never again." The shock on her face was almost comical. She'd never expected me to stand up to her like this. As she stumbled backward, the fight seemed to drain out of her. "You don't understand," she whimpered. "I was just trying to protect my family." "By tearing it apart?" I asked, my voice softer now. "Olivia, your actions have hurt everyone, including yourself." Just then there was another knock at the door. To our surprise, it was Alexander, looking tired and drawn. "I thought I might find you here," he said to Olivia. As he stepped inside, the air crackled with tension. Alexander turned to us, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said, "and I've come to a decision. Olivia, if you can't accept Grace as part of this family, then I'm afraid I can't continue our marriage." The room fell silent. Olivia's face drained of color as she stared at her husband in disbelief. You're choosing them over me?" she whispered. Alexander shook his head. "I'm choosing kindness and respect, something you seem to have forgotten." Olivia crumpled to the floor, her sobs echoing through the room. For a moment I felt a pang of sympathy. But then I remembered all the pain she'd caused, all the nights I'd cried myself to sleep because of her cruel. Daniel knelt beside his mother. "Mom, this is your last chance. If you want to be part of our lives, you need to get help. You need to change." Olivia looked up, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. I don't know how," she admitted, her voice small and broken. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to say. "We can help you, Olivia, but only if you're willing to put in the work, only if you're truly sorry for what you've done." The room held its breath as we waited for Olivia's response. This was it, the moment that would define our family's future. Would Olivia choose to change, or would she cling to her bitterness? As she opened her mouth to speak, I felt the weight of everything we'd been through pressing down on me. Whatever happened next, I knew our lives would never be the same. The climax of our family drama was upon us, and I braced myself for the fallout, hoping against hope that we'd find a way through this storm together. The weeks following Olivia's breakdown were a whirlwind of change. Alexander, true to his word, asked Olivia to leave their home. The news spread quickly through their social circle, and I watched with a mix of sadness and vindication as Olivia faced the consequences of her actions. One sunny afternoon, as Daniel and I sat on our porch, Amelia pulled up in her car. Her face was a mix of emotions as she approached us. "I just came from Dad's," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Mom's gone to stay with her sister. She's agreed to start therapy." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Daniel squeezed my hand, his eyes reflecting the same cautious hope I felt. As the days turned into weeks, our family began to heal. Alexander became a frequent visitor, his relationship with Daniel growing stronger without Olivia's toxic influence. Amelia and I grew closer, bonding over our shared experiences. One evening, as we all gathered for dinner, including my parents, Sophia and Victor, I looked around the table and felt a surge of gratitude. This was what family should be, supportive, loving, and kind. My mother, ever perceptive, caught my eye. "You look happy, sweetheart," she said softly. I smiled, feeling tears prick at my eyes. "I am, Mom. For the first time in a long time, I really am." Just then Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face growing serious. "It's Mom," he said, looking at me uncertainly. The room fell silent as I nodded for him to answer. He put the phone on speaker. "Daniel? Grace?" Olivia's voice was hesitant, lacking its usual sharp edge. "I wanted to apologize, to both of you. My therapist suggested I make amends, but that's not why I'm calling. I'm calling because I'm truly sorry for everything I've done." I felt my breath catch in my throat. Daniel looked at me, his eyes questioning. I took a deep breath and spoke. "Thank you, Olivia. That means a lot to hear." There was a pause, then Olivia continued, her voice thick with emotion. "I know I have a long way to go, and I understand if you can't forgive me. But I want you to know that I'm working on myself. I want to be better for all of you." As the call ended, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was still hurt and mistrust to overcome, but it was a step in the right direction. Later that night, as Daniel and I lay in bed, he turned to me, his eyes shining with love and admiration. "You amazed me today, Grace," he said softly. "Your strength, your compassion. I fall in love with you more every day." I snuggled closer to him, feeling truly content. "We've been through so much," I whispered, "but we've come out stronger." As I drifted off to sleep, I reflected on the journey we'd been through. The pain, the tears, the moments of despair, they had all led to this. A family healing, relationships strengthening, and a love that had weathered the storm. I thought about Olivia, and for the first time, I felt genuine hope for her. She had a long road ahead, but she had taken the first step. And maybe, just maybe, one day we could all sit around a table together, the past forgiven, if not forgotten. The next morning, I woke up feeling refreshed and renewed. As I stood on our porch watching the sunrise, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. The bitterness that had clouded our lives for so long was fading, replaced by a sweetness that came from forgiveness and growth. I smiled to myself, realizing that this was my sweet vengeance, not in Olivia's downfall, but in our family's rise from the ashes of conflict. We had faced the storm together and emerged stronger, more united than ever before. As Daniel joined me, wrapping his arms around me from behind, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Our love, tested by fire, had proven unbreakable. And in that moment, basking in the warm glow of the rising sun and my husband's embrace, I knew that the best was yet to come.
I swear to God, Judith, if you don't get out of my kitchen right now, You'll what, dear? Serve us undercooked chicken? I'm only trying to help. I gripped the serving spoon so hard my knuckles turned white. The urge to fling scalding gravy at my mother-in-law's perfectly coiffed hair was almost overwhelming. But I took a deep breath, plastered on a smile, and turned to face her. I appreciate the offer, but I've got this under control. Why don't you join the others in the living room? I'm sure Ethan would love to show you the new entertainment system. Judith's lips thinned, but she nodded curtly and left the kitchen. I sagged against the counter, exhausted. It was supposed to be a joyous occasion, our housewarming party, celebrating the completion of our dream home. Instead, it felt like a battlefield. My name is Lila, and I'm beginning to wonder if I've made a terrible mistake. Everything okay in here? Ethan's warm voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, and I leaned into his embrace. Your mother's driving me crazy, I muttered. He sighed. I know. I'm sorry. She means well, she just has a funny way of showing it. I finished for him. Ethan kissed the top of my head. It'll get better. They just need time to adjust. I wanted to believe him, but the snide comments and disapproving looks from Judith and Veronica, Ethan's sister, had been relentless since we announced our engagement 3 years ago. Now, with my mother Sylvia living with us, their hostility had reached new heights. Lila. My mother's soft voice called from the hallway. Do you need any help, sweetheart? I extracted myself from Ethan's arms and went to greet her. Sylvia sat in her wheelchair, a gentle smile on her face. I'm fine, Mom. Just putting the finishing touches on dinner. It smells wonderful, she said. I'm so proud of you, honey. This house, this party, you've done an amazing job. Warmth bloomed in my chest at her words. Thanks, Mom. I couldn't have done it without you and Ethan. A high-pitched laugh from the living room made me wince. Veronica's voice carried clearly. I still can't believe they built a ramp instead of stairs. It looks so institutional. I closed my eyes, willing myself not to react. When I opened them, Sylvia was watching me with concern. Don't let them get to you, she said softly. This is your home, Lila. You and Ethan built it with love. I nodded, squeezing her hand. I know. I just wish they could see that. The timer on the oven beeped, saving me from further conversation. I hurried back to the kitchen, Ethan close behind. I'll set the table, he offered. Thanks, love. As I pulled the roast from the oven, voices drifted in from the living room. It's just not right, Judith was saying. Ethan should be focusing on his career, not playing nursemaid to his mother-in-law. I know, Veronica agreed. Lila's holding him back. He could do so much better. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled, nearly dropping the heavy dish. Whoa. Ethan steadied me, concern etched on his face. Are you okay? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He frowned, clearly not believing me, but let it go. Dinner's ready, I called out, my voice only slightly strained. As everyone gathered around the table, I tried to shake off the overheard conversation. But Judith's critical gaze and Veronica's smug smile made it impossible to relax. This looks interesting, Judith said, eyeing the roast dubiously. It's Ethan's favorite, I replied, forcing a smile. Right, honey? Ethan nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. Lila's an amazing cook. When she has time to cook, you mean? Veronica chimed in. It must be so hard, juggling work and taking care of your mother. I don't know how you manage it all, Lila. The implication was clear. I didn't manage it all. Not well, anyway. We managed just fine, Ethan said firmly. Mom, would you like some wine? As conversation flowed around me, I found myself retreating inward. The dream home we'd worked so hard to build suddenly felt like a gilded cage. Every choice we'd made, from the open floor plan to accommodate Sylvia's wheelchair to the soothing color palette I'd agonized over, was now tainted by Judith and Veronica's judgment. A toast, Judith announced, raising her glass. To new beginnings and family coming together. The words should have been comforting. Instead, they felt like a threat. As we clinked glasses, I caught Sylvia's eye across the table. She gave me a small, encouraging nod. In that moment, I made a silent vow. I would not let Judith and Veronica destroy what we'd built. This was our home, our family, and I would fight to protect it no matter the cost. Little did I know just how high that cost would be. The alarm blared, jolting me awake. I reached over to silence it, my hand brushing against Ethan's empty side of the bed. He'd already left for work, probably hours ago. The clock read 7:15 a.m. I'd overslept again. Shit, I muttered, throwing off the covers. As I rushed through my morning routine, guilt gnawed at me. Ethan had been working longer hours lately, the stress etched into the lines on his face. I should be doing more to support him, not sleeping in. I found my mother in the kitchen, already dressed and sipping her morning tea. Good morning, sweetheart, Sylvia said, her smile warm. I've made you some toast and coffee to go. You're a lifesaver, Mom, I said, grabbing the travel mug and kissing her cheek. I'm sorry I can't stay and chat. I'm running late. Don't worry about me, she assured me. Go, have a good day at work. As I rushed out the door, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. I sighed, typing back a quick "love you" before starting the car. It seemed like we were ships passing in the night lately, barely having time for more than a quick kiss or hurried conversation. The workday flew by in a blur of meetings and deadlines. By the time I got home, exhaustion had settled deep in my bones. I found Sylvia in the living room, her brow furrowed as she stared at her phone. Everything okay, Mom? I asked, setting down my bag. She looked up, startled. Oh, Lila, I didn't hear you come in. It's nothing, dear. Just, well, Judith called earlier. My stomach clenched. What did she want? Sylvia hesitated. She and Veronica are coming over tomorrow. They said they need to discuss something important with you and Ethan. Of course they are, I muttered, collapsing onto the couch. Did they bother to ask if we're free? Or if it's okay to just show up? You know how they are, sweetheart, Sylvia said gently. Try not to let it get to you.
But it did get to me.
All through dinner and into the night, as I waited for Ethan to come home, my mind raced with possibilities. What could be so important? And why did it feel like a trap? It was past midnight when I heard Ethan's key in the lock. He stumbled in, looking haggard and pale. Hey, I said softly, rising from the couch. You okay? He nodded, but his eyes were distant. Just tired. Big project at work. I'm going to bed. Ethan, wait. I called after him. Your mom and sister are coming over tomorrow. They said it's important. He paused on the stairs, his shoulders tensing. Can't deal with that right now, Lila. We'll talk in the morning. But morning came, and Ethan was gone before I woke up. Again. The doorbell rang at precisely 2 p.m. I took a deep breath, steeling myself before opening the door. Lila, darling. Judith cooed, air kissing my cheeks. You look tired. Are you getting enough rest? I'm fine, I said through gritted teeth. Please come in. Veronica breezed past me without a word, her designer perfume leaving a cloying trail. They settled themselves in the living room as if they owned the place. Where's Ethan? Judith demanded. This concerns him too. He's at work, I replied, perching on the edge of an armchair. He's been very busy lately. Veronica sniffed. I'm sure he has. It can't be easy, supporting so many people on one salary. I bit back a retort. What's this about? You said it was important. Judith leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. We're worried about Ethan, dear. He's working himself to the bone, and for what? A house he can barely afford, caring for a mother-in-law who… That's enough, I snapped. My mother is not a burden. Ethan and I made this decision together. Did you? Veronica asked, her tone sickly sweet. Or did you manipulate him into it? Before I could respond, the front door opened. Ethan walked in, looking even worse than he had last night. What's going on? He asked, his gaze darting between us. Oh, Ethan, Judith cried, rushing to embrace him. We've been so worried about you. You work too hard, you look ill. This can't go on. I watched, helpless, as Ethan sagged into his mother's arms. The fight seemed to drain out of him. I'm fine, Mom, he mumbled. Just tired. You're not fine, Veronica insisted. You need to take care of yourself. Maybe it's time to reconsider some things. The implication hung heavy in the air. I felt my world tilting on its axis. I think you should go, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Judith turned to me, her eyes cold. We're not going anywhere. Ethan needs us. His real family. As they fussed over Ethan, guiding him to the couch, I retreated to the kitchen. My hands shook as I filled a glass with water. When I turned around, Judith was standing in the doorway. This isn't personal, Lila, she said, her voice low. But Ethan deserves better than this. Arrangement. You must see that. She pressed something into my hand, an envelope, before sweeping out of the room. I stared after her, my heart pounding. With trembling fingers, I opened the letter. My dearest son. It began in Judith's flowery script. It's time to come home. Leave Lila. For the sake of your real family. The glass slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor. And with it, the last of my illusions about this family I'd married into. The shrill ring of my phone pierced the pre-dawn silence. My heart raced as I fumbled for it, instantly awake. No good news ever came at 4:30 a.m. Mrs. Harrison? This is Mercy Hospital. Your husband, Ethan, has been admitted. He collapsed at work. The world tilted on its axis. I barely registered the rest of the conversation, my mind a whirlwind of panic and disbelief. Somehow, I managed to wake my mother, call a neighbor to stay with her, and drive to the hospital without crashing. The emergency room was a blur of harsh fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells. A harried nurse directed me to a curtained-off area where Ethan lay, pale and still against starched white sheets. Machines beeped steadily, monitoring his vital signs. Ethan, I whispered, grasping his hand. It was cold and limp in mine. I'm here. You're going to be okay. A doctor appeared, clipboard in hand. Mrs. Harrison? I'm Dr. Patel. Your husband suffered a severe panic attack, likely brought on by extreme stress and exhaustion. We're running tests to rule out any underlying conditions, but for now, he needs rest. I nodded numbly, guilt washing over me. How had I not seen how bad things had gotten? I'd been so caught up in my own struggles with Judith and Veronica that I'd missed the signs of Ethan's deteriorating health. As if summoned by my thoughts, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Judith's shrill voice cut through the hospital's quiet hum. Where is my son? I demand to see him immediately. I steeled myself as Judith and Veronica burst into the small space, their eyes wild with a mixture of concern and accusation. What have you done to him? Judith hissed, pushing past me to Ethan's bedside. I haven't done anything, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. He collapsed at work. The doctor says. Oh, spare us your excuses, Veronica sneered. We all know who's really to blame here. If Ethan wasn't working himself to death trying to support you and your mother. That's enough, Dr. Patel interrupted, her voice firm. Mr. Harrison needs rest and calm. If you can't provide that, I'll have to ask you to leave. Judith turned on the doctor, her eyes flashing. Do you know who we are? We're his family. His real family. The words stung, but I refused to let them see how deeply they cut. "Please," I said quietly. "Let's not do this here. Ethan needs us to be united right now." For a moment, it seemed like my plea had gotten through. Then Judith's face hardened. "United? You're the reason he's in this state. If you truly cared about Ethan, you'd step aside and let us take care of him." Before I could respond, a weak voice cut through the tension. "Stop it." Ethan's eyes fluttered open, unfocused but aware. "All of you, just stop." We all froze, watching as Ethan struggled to sit up. I moved to help him, but Judith beat me to it, fussing over him like he was a child. "Oh, darling," she cooed. "Don't worry. We're here now. We'll take you home, and—" "No," Ethan said, his voice stronger now. "I'm not going anywhere. Lila is my wife. This is my family. All of you." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt a glimmer of hope, seeing Ethan stand up to his mother for perhaps the first time in his life. But it was short-lived. Ethan's face suddenly contorted in pain. He clutched at his chest, gasping for air. Alarms blared as his body went rigid, then limp. "Code Blue. DR." Patel shouted, pushing us aside. A team of nurses rushed in, and I found myself being ushered out of the room, Judith and Veronica's wails echoing in my ears. The next few hours passed in a haze of fear and disbelief. I sat in the waiting room, numb, as Judith paced and Veronica sobbed dramatically. When Dr. Patel finally emerged, her face grave, I knew before she spoke. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "We did everything we could, but Mr. Harrison suffered a massive heart attack. He didn't make it. The world stopped." I heard Judith's anguished scream, as if from a great distance. Veronica collapsed into a chair, her makeup streaking down her face. But I felt nothing, just a vast, echoing emptiness where my heart used to be. As the reality of Ethan's death sank in, Judith's grief twisted into something uglier. She rounded on me, her face contorted with rage and pain. "This is your fault," she spat. "You killed my son with your selfishness. You and that mother of yours." I should have defended myself. Should have pointed out that it was their constant pressure and manipulation that had driven Ethan to this breaking point. But I was too shell-shocked to form words. "We'll make sure everyone knows the truth," Veronica chimed in, her voice thick with tears and venom. "You'll pay for what you've done, Lila." As they continued their tirade, hurling accusations and threats, I retreated into myself. The Ethan I knew and loved wouldn't have wanted this. He'd wanted peace, wanted us to be a family. But that dream had died with him. I stood up abruptly, cutting off Judith mid-rant. "I'm going to say goodbye to my husband," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "You can continue this later." Ignoring their protests, I walked back into Ethan's room. He looked peaceful now, the lines of stress erased from his face. I took his hand one last time, my tears finally falling. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you from all of this. But I promise you, Ethan, I'll find a way to honor your memory, to live the life we dreamed of, even if you can't be here to share it." As I pressed a final kiss to his forehead, I knew that the real battle was just beginning. Judith and Veronica would stop at nothing to destroy me now. But for Ethan's sake, and for my own, I had to be stronger than ever before. The drive home from Ethan's funeral was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as I navigated through the rain-slicked streets. Beside me, Mom sat in silence, her weathered hand resting on my arm, a silent pillar of strength. "We're almost home," I murmured, more to myself than to her. Home. The word felt hollow now, tainted by loss and the lingering echoes of Judith and Veronica's accusations at the cemetery. As we pulled into the driveway, something felt off. The porch light was on, casting an eerie glow in the gathering dusk. I frowned. I was sure I'd turned it off before we left. "Lila," Mom said softly, her eyes fixed on the front door. "There's someone inside." My heart raced as I saw movement through the window. Instinctively, I reached for my phone, ready to call the police. But then a familiar silhouette appeared, and my blood ran cold. "It's Judith," I whispered, disbelief and anger warring within me. "And Veronica." Mom's grip on my arm tightened. "What are they doing here?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." With shaking hands, I helped Mom into her wheelchair and approached the front door. I hesitated for a moment, key in hand, before squaring my shoulders and stepping inside. The scene that greeted us was surreal. Judith and Veronica lounged in the living room as if they owned the place. Boxes were stacked haphazardly around them, and I realized with growing horror that they were filled with my belongings. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, my voice cracking. Judith looked up, her face a mask of faux sympathy. "Oh, Lila dear. We thought it best to get a head start on packing for you. After all, you can't possibly stay here now that Ethan's gone." Veronica nodded, a cruel smile playing at her lips. "This house belongs to the family. And let's face it, you're not family anymore." The audacity of their words struck me like a physical blow. I stumbled back, steadying myself against Mom's wheelchair. "This is our home," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Ethan and I built it together. You have no right." "We have every right," Judith interrupted, her tone icy. "Ethan left no will. As his mother and sister, we're his next of kin. The house, the assets, they all revert to us." I felt the floor shift beneath me. How could I have been so naive? In all our planning, in all our dreams, we'd never considered the unthinkable. We'd never prepared for a world without Ethan. "You can't do this," Mom spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. "This house was built to accommodate my needs. Where do you expect us to go?" Veronica shrugged, examining her manicured nails. "That's hardly our concern, is it? You should have thought of that before you leeched off my brother for all these years." White-hot rage surged through me. I stepped forward, fists clenched at my sides. "Get out," I snarled. "Get out of our house right now. Or I swear to God." "Or what?" Judith challenged, rising to her feet. "Face it, Lila. You've lost. It's time for you to crawl back to whatever hole you came from and leave us to grieve our son in peace." I opened my mouth to retort, but Mom's hand on my arm stopped me. "Lila," she said softly, "let's just go. We can figure this out later." The fight drained out of me as I looked into her eyes, seeing the exhaustion and sorrow mirrored there. With a heavy heart, I nodded. "Fine," I said, turning back to Judith and Veronica. "We'll go. But this isn't over." As we retreated to the guest room, the only space not yet invaded by their presence, I felt hollow. Empty. How had it come to this? In the span of a week, I'd lost my husband, my home, and any illusion of family I'd clung to. Mom watched me as I paced the small room, her eyes filled with concern. "What are we going to do?" she asked quietly. I ran a hand through my hair, mind racing. "I don't know," I admitted, "but we can't stay here. Not with them." As I started gathering what few possessions remained untouched, my hand brushed against something wedged between the mattress and headboard. Frowning, I pulled out a sealed envelope. My breath caught as I recognized Ethan's handwriting. With trembling fingers, I tore it open, unfolding the letter inside. "My dearest Lila," it began. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I'm so sorry for leaving you to face this alone. But I need you to know that you were the best thing that ever happened to me. Our life together, our home, the family we built, it was everything I ever wanted." Tears blurred my vision as I continued reading. Ethan's words were filled with love, regret, and a final, desperate plea. "Don't let them win, Lila. Don't let my mother and sister destroy what we built. You're stronger than they are. You always have been. Live the life we dreamed of, even if I can't be there to share it. Be free, my love. Be happy." As I finished the letter, a strange calm settled over me. Ethan's final gift wasn't just his words, it was the strength to face what lay ahead. I looked up at Mom, a new resolve burning in my chest. "Pack what you can," I said. "We're leaving tonight." "But where will we go?" she asked. I squared my shoulders, Ethan's letter clutched to my heart. I don't know yet, but wherever it is, it'll be ours. And it'll be free of them. As we prepared to leave the house we'd called home, I silently vowed to honor Ethan's memory. Judith and Veronica might have won this battle, but the war was far from over. And I intended to fight with everything I had. The morning light filtered through the dusty motel curtains, casting a sickly glow across the room. I'd barely slept, my mind racing with plans and worries. Mom stirred in the bed beside me, her face etched with concern as she woke. "Lila," she said softly, "what are we going to do?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the day ahead. "We're going to fight, Mom. We're going to take back what's ours." With renewed determination, I helped Mom into her wheelchair, and we made our way back to the house. Our house. As we pulled into the driveway, I saw Judith peering out the window, her face twisting with disdain. "Remember," I told Mom, "no matter what they say, we have a right to be here." We entered without knocking, the familiar scent of home now tainted by Judith's overpowering perfume. Veronica lounged on the couch, scrolling through her phone with affected boredom. "Oh, look who's back," Judith sneered. "Come to beg for scraps?" I ignored her, wheeling Mom into the living room. "We're not leaving," I said firmly. "This is our home, and you have no legal right to be here." Veronica laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Is that so? And who's going to make us leave?" "You, if I have to," I replied, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "I've contacted a lawyer. Ethan and I built this house together. Half of it is legally mine." Judith's face darkened. "You ungrateful little—" "That's enough," Mom interrupted, her quiet voice cutting through the tension. "Haven't you done enough damage? Can't you see how much pain you're causing?" For a moment, I saw a flicker of something, regret, shame, in Judith's eyes. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by cold fury. "Pain," she hissed. "You want to talk about pain? My son is dead because of you. Because he worked himself to death trying to support you and your crippled mother." The words hit like a physical blow. I stumbled back, tears stinging my eyes. But before I could respond, Mom spoke up again. "Ethan loved us," she said softly. "He loved Lila with his whole heart. And he would be ashamed of how you're behaving now." Veronica snorted. "Please. Ethan was too weak to stand up to you. He always was." Something inside me snapped. "Get out," I snarled, advancing on them. "Get out of our house right now, or I swear to God I'll—" "You'll what?" Judith challenged, rising to meet me. "Face it, Lila. You're nothing without Ethan. You can't even take care of yourself, let alone your mother. Why don't you do everyone a favor and just disappear?" I felt the fight drain out of me, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. This was Ethan's family, the people who were supposed to love and support us. How had it come to this? "Fine," I said quietly. "If that's how you want it, we'll go. But don't think for a second this is over." As we turned to leave, Veronica's mocking voice followed us. "Run along now. We'll take good care of Ethan's things. After all, we're the only real family he had." The door slammed behind us, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. I helped Mom into the car, my movements mechanical, numb. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," Mom said, reaching for my hand. "We'll figure something out. We always do." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As we drove away from the only home we'd known, I felt something inside me harden. Ethan's words from his letter echoed in my mind. "Don't let them win, Lila. You're stronger than they are." We checked into a small apartment that afternoon, a temporary solution while we figured out our next move. As I helped Mom settle in, my phone buzzed with a text from our lawyer. "Good news," it read. "Found some irregularities in Ethan's finances. Might be grounds for challenging the estate. Call me ASAP." A spark of hope ignited in my chest. Maybe all wasn't lost after all. That night, as Mom slept, I sat by the window, staring out at the unfamiliar cityscape. The pain of loss, of Ethan, of our home, of the life we'd built, was still raw. But beneath it, a new resolve was taking root. I thought of Judith and Veronica, so sure in their victory. They thought they'd broken me, driven me away for good. But they'd underestimated me. They always had. I won't let them win, I whispered to the night. I'll fight for us, Ethan, for the life we dreamed of. And I'll make sure your real legacy, one of love and kindness, lives on. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The road ahead would be hard, but for the first time since Ethan's death, I felt ready to face it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles. But I was done being a victim. It was time to take control of my own story. And I knew, deep in my heart, that wherever Ethan was, he was cheering me on. 6 months had passed since we'd left our home, and life had settled into a new rhythm. Mom and I had found a small, accessible apartment, and I'd thrown myself into work, determined to build a stable future for us both. The pain of losing Ethan still ached, but it had dulled to a manageable throb. I was sorting through bills at the kitchen table when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Lila. The voice was familiar, but strained. It's Veronica. My grip tightened on the phone. What do you want? Please don't hang up, she pleaded, her usual haughtiness replaced by desperation. We need your help. It's bad, Lila. I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to end the call. Why should I help you? After everything you've done? Veronica's voice cracked. I know we don't deserve it, but we have nowhere else to turn. Mom and we've lost everything. Despite myself, I felt a flicker of curiosity. What do you mean, lost everything? She launched into a rambling explanation. Something about an investment opportunity, promises of huge returns. But it had all been a scam. They'd sunk every penny they had, including the money from selling our house, into a fraudulent scheme. We're facing eviction, Veronica finished, her voice small. Mom's a mess. I don't know what to do. A part of me, a vindictive, hurt part, wanted to laugh, to revel in their misfortune. But Ethan's voice echoed in my mind. Be better than them, Lila. Always be better. I took a deep breath. I'm sorry that happened to you, but I don't see how I can help. Please, Veronica begged. We just need a loan. Enough to get back on our feet. We'll pay you back, I swear. No, I said firmly. I can't do that. I won't. But we're family, she cried. The words hit me like a slap. Family? I repeated, incredulous. You made it very clear that I wasn't family. You took everything from me, Veronica. My home, my memories of Ethan. And now you have the audacity to claim we're family? Silence stretched between us. When Veronica spoke again, her voice was thick with tears. You're right. We were horrible to you. I see that now. I'm so sorry, Lila. For everything. I closed my eyes, conflicting emotions warring within me. I appreciate the apology, I said finally, but it doesn't change anything. I can't help you. Please, she whispered. We have nowhere else to go. That's not my problem, I replied, surprised by the steel in my voice. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them. I ended the call, my hands shaking. Mom wheeled into the room, concern etched on her face. Everything okay, sweetheart? I nodded, forcing a smile. Just a wrong number. But as the days passed, I couldn't shake the conversation from my mind. I found myself wondering about Judith and Veronica. Were they really destitute? Part of me wanted to believe it was just another manipulation tactic. But the desperation in Veronica's voice had seemed genuine. A week later, my curiosity got the better of me. I drove past our old house, half expecting to see it as immaculate as ever. Instead, I was shocked to find a for sale sign in the overgrown yard. The paint was peeling, the garden I'd lovingly tended now a tangle of weeds. As I sat in my car, staring at the neglected remnants of our dream home, a flood of memories washed over me. Ethan and I painting the nursery, full of hope for a future that never came. Mom's laughter echoing through the kitchen as we cooked Sunday dinners. The quiet moments on the porch, Ethan's arm around me, planning our life together. Tears blurred my vision. I realized I was gripping Ethan's letter, which I still carried everywhere. His words seemed to leap off the page. Don't let them win, Lila. But don't let bitterness consume you either. With a shaky breath, I started the car and drove to the address Veronica had given me. It was a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. I spotted Judith immediately, sitting on a bench outside one of the rooms. She looked years older, her once immaculate appearance now disheveled and worn. As I approached, her eyes widened in recognition. Lila, she whispered, disbelief etched on her face. What are you doing here? I sat beside her, maintaining a careful distance. I wanted to see for myself, I said quietly. To understand. Judith's shoulders slumped. Now you have. Are you satisfied? Have you come to gloat? I shook my head.
No.
I'm not like you, Judith. I don't take pleasure in other people's pain. She flinched at my words, tears welling in her eyes. We've lost everything, she whispered. The house, our savings, our reputation. All because I was too proud, too stubborn to see what was right in front of me. And what was that? I asked, my voice gentle despite myself. Judith met my gaze, her eyes filled with regret. That Ethan was happy, that you were good for him, that I was the one tearing our family apart, not you. Her words hung in the air between us, heavy with the weight of years of conflict and misunderstanding. I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, exactly, but a release. The anger and bitterness I'd been carrying began to loosen its grip. I can't undo what's been done, I said finally. And I can't give you money or a place to stay. But I can offer you this, a chance to start over, to be better. Judith looked at me, hope and wariness warring in her expression.
How?
I stood, smoothing my skirt. I know a shelter that helps women get back on their feet. Job training, counseling, the whole works. If you're serious about changing, I can make a call. She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. Thank you, Lila. I don't deserve your kindness. No, I agreed. You don't. But Ethan would have wanted me to offer it anyway. As I walked back to my car, I felt lighter than I had in months. The road ahead would still be challenging, but for the first time, I felt truly free. Free from the weight of resentment, free from the shadow of Judith and Veronica's cruelty. I was ready to write my own story now, one of resilience, growth, and the kind of love that transcends even death. And I knew, deep in my heart, that Ethan would be proud. The crisp autumn air nipped at my cheeks as I walked through the farmer's market, basket in hand. It had been nearly a year since Ethan's death, and life had settled into a new normal. Mom and I had found peace in our small apartment, and I'd thrown myself into my work, finding purpose in helping others navigate their own grief. As I browsed the colorful produce, a familiar voice caught my attention. I turned to see Sarah, an old friend from our neighborhood, deep in conversation with another woman. Can you believe what happened to Judith and Veronica? Sarah whispered, not realizing I was within earshot. I heard they're practically destitute now. My ears perked up, curiosity getting the better of me. I inched closer, pretending to examine a display of apples. Serves them right, the other woman replied. After the way they treated poor Lila and her mother. The whole town's turned against them. Sarah nodded vigorously. I saw Judith at the grocery store last week. She looked terrible, like she'd aged 10 years overnight. And Veronica? I heard she can't even show her face around here anymore. A conflicting mix of emotions washed over me. Satisfaction, pity, and a twinge of guilt. I'd known things were bad for them, but I hadn't realized the extent of their fall from grace. As I made my way home, my mind raced. Part of me wanted to revel in their misfortune, to see it as karmic justice for all the pain they'd caused. But another part, the part that sounded suspiciously like Ethan, whispered that taking pleasure in others' suffering would only poison my own heart. I found Mom in the living room, engrossed in a book. She looked up as I entered, her brow furrowing at my expression. What's wrong, sweetheart? She asked, setting her book aside. I sank onto the couch beside her wheelchair, suddenly overwhelmed. I overheard some gossip about Judith and Veronica, I admitted. Apparently, they've become social pariahs. Everyone in town knows what they did to us, and they're paying the price for it. Mom reached out, taking my hand in hers. And how does that make you feel? I sighed, struggling to articulate the storm of emotions swirling inside me. Conflicted, I finally said, part of me feels vindicated, I guess, like they're finally getting what they deserve.
But then I feel guilty for feeling that way.
Ethan wouldn't have wanted this. No, Mom agreed softly.
He wouldn't have. But he's not here, Lila.
You are, and you're allowed to feel whatever you're feeling. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Tears welled up in my eyes, spilling over before I could stop them. I miss him so much, Mom, I whispered. Sometimes I think I'm healing, moving forward. And then something like this happens, and it's like losing him all over again. Mom squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with unshed tears of her own. I know, sweetheart. Grief isn't linear. It comes in waves. But you're stronger than you know. Ethan saw that in you, even when you couldn't see it yourself. We sat in companionable silence for a while, each lost in our own thoughts. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room, I made a decision. I need to see them, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Judith and Veronica. I need to, I don't know, make peace maybe? Mom studied me for a long moment before nodding. If that's what you need to do, then do it. Just be careful, Lila. Protect your heart. The next day, I found myself standing outside the women's shelter where I'd helped Judith and Veronica get settled. My palms were sweaty, my heart racing as I pushed open the door. The receptionist recognized me, offering a sympathetic smile. They're in the common room, she said, gesturing down the hall. I steeled myself before entering, unsure of what I'd find. The sight that greeted me was a far cry from the proud, polished women I'd known. Judith sat alone by the window, her once immaculate hair now streaked with gray and pulled back in a messy bun. Veronica hunched over a table in the corner, furiously scribbling in a notebook. As I approached, Judith looked up. Her eyes widened in recognition, a mix of shame and defiance flashing across her face. Lila, she said, her voice hoarse. What are you doing here? Veronica's head snapped up at the sound of my name. She paled, looking like she wanted to bolt from the room. I took a deep breath, centering myself. I came to see how you were doing, I said simply. Judith barked out a harsh laugh. How we're doing? We've lost everything. Our home, our friends, our dignity. Are you here to gloat? I shook my head, feeling a sudden wave of pity wash over me. No, I said softly. I'm here because I think it's time we all found a way to move forward. Veronica spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. Why would you want to help us? After everything we did? I thought of Ethan, of the love and compassion he'd shown even in the face of their cruelty. I thought of Mom, her quiet strength and unwavering support. And I thought of myself, the woman I'd become through this crucible of loss and pain. Because holding on to anger and resentment will only hurt me in the end, I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. And because Ethan would have wanted me to find a way to forgive, even if you don't deserve it. As I stood there, facing the two women who had caused me so much pain, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a step towards healing, towards reclaiming the peace that had been stolen from me. In that moment, I realized that true justice wasn't about seeing others suffer. It was about rising above the pain, about choosing to live with kindness and integrity even when it's hard. It was about honoring Ethan's memory by becoming the best version of myself. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. The morning sun streamed through the windows of our new home, casting a warm glow across the living room. I stood at the kitchen counter, sipping my coffee and watching Mom tend to her small herb garden on the balcony. It had been 2 years since we'd left our old life behind, and the peace we'd found here still felt like a miracle some days. Lila, Mom called, wheeling herself back inside. Don't forget, we have that community garden meeting this afternoon. I nodded, smiling. We'd thrown ourselves into local volunteer work, finding purpose and connection in helping others. It was a far cry from the isolated, embattled life we'd led before. As I gathered my things for work, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Sarah, my old neighbor. "Thought you should know, Judith and Veronica are moving out of the shelter today. They've found a small apartment across town." I paused, letting the information sink in. It had been months since I'd last seen Ethan's mother and sister. Our last encounter at the shelter had been tense but civil, a tentative truce forged in the ashes of our shared loss. "Everything okay?" Mom asked, noticing my distraction. I showed her the text. "I'm not sure how to feel about this," I admitted. Mom reached out, squeezing my hand. "You don't have to feel any particular way, sweetheart. Their journey is their own now." I nodded, grateful for her wisdom. "You're right. I just hope they've found some peace, like we have." The workday flew by, and soon I found myself at the community center, surrounded by enthusiastic gardeners discussing plans for the upcoming spring planting. As the meeting wrapped up, I noticed a familiar figure hovering near the entrance. Veronica. Our eyes met, and for a moment, I was transported back to that awful day in the hospital, the day we lost Ethan. But the woman before me now bore little resemblance to the spiteful, entitled sister-in-law I'd known. She looked humbled, uncertain. I approached her slowly, giving her plenty of time to retreat if she wanted. But she stood her ground, a mix of emotions playing across her face. "Lila," she said softly, I hope it's okay that I'm here." I saw the flyer for the gardening program and thought. "It's fine," I assured her, surprised by the lack of animosity I felt. "Everyone's welcome here." Veronica nodded, twisting her hands nervously. "I wanted to tell you, Mom and I were trying to start over, to be better. I know it doesn't make up for everything we did, but—" "You're right," I interrupted gently. "It doesn't, but it's a start." We stood in awkward silence for a moment before Veronica spoke again. "You look good, Lila."
Happy.
"I'm glad." The sincerity in her voice caught me off guard.
"Thank you," I said.
"I am happy. It hasn't been easy, but you're stronger than any of us gave you credit for," she finished, a rueful smile on her face. "Ethan always knew that, didn't he?" The mention of Ethan's name sent a familiar pang through my heart, but it wasn't the sharp agony it had once been. Instead, it was a bittersweet ache, a reminder of the love we'd shared and the growth his loss had sparked in me. "He did," I agreed. "And he'd be proud of you too, for trying to change." Tears welled in Veronica's eyes. "I don't deserve your kindness." "Maybe not," I said. "But Ethan would want me to offer it anyway. That's the kind of man he was, the kind of person I'm trying to be." As Veronica left, promising to return for the next gardening session, I felt a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying lift from my shoulders. The last tendrils of bitterness and resentment I'd been holding on to dissipated, leaving behind a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. That evening, as Mom and I sat on our balcony watching the sunset, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. "I wish Ethan could see this," I said softly. "See us thriving, see how far we've come." Mom reached over, taking my hand in hers. "He does see it, sweetheart. In every kind act, every moment of joy, every time you choose love over bitterness, that's Ethan's legacy living on through you." Tears pricked at my eyes, but they were tears of gratitude, not sorrow. "You're right," I said. "And I'm going to keep honoring that legacy every day." As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, I felt a profound sense of contentment wash over me. The road had been long and painful, filled with loss and betrayal, but it had also led me here, to a place of strength, resilience, and hard-won peace. I thought of Judith and Veronica embarking on their own journey of redemption, of the community we'd built here, full of people supporting and uplifting each other, of Mom, my unwavering rock through it all. And I thought of Ethan, not with the aching grief of before, but with a warm fondness, grateful for the love we'd shared and the lessons that love had taught me. The future stretched out before us, full of possibility, There would be challenges, of course, but I knew now that I had the strength to face them, that we had the strength to face them, together. As night fell and the first stars began to twinkle in the sky, I made a silent promise, to Ethan, to Mom, to myself. I would live fully, love deeply, and always strive to be the best version of myself. Not out of obligation or fear, but because I discovered that was the truest path to happiness. In the end, it wasn't about revenge or justice or even forgiveness. It was about choosing, every day, to live a life that honored the love we'd shared and the growth we'd achieved. And in that choice, I found my greatest victory.
The lipstick on Nathan's collar wasn't mine. I stared at the incriminating smear of red, my heart pounding in my chest. How many times had I washed his shirts without noticing? This time, though, the evidence was unmistakable. I heard the front door open, and Nathan's voice called out, "Sophie, I'm home." Quickly, I shoved the shirt back into the laundry basket and plastered on a smile. "In here, honey?" I called back, my voice steadier than I felt. Nathan appeared in the doorway of our bedroom, his tie loosened and a weary smile on his face. "Long day at the bank," he said, leaning in to kiss me. I turned my cheek at the last second, and his lips grazed my skin instead of meeting my mouth. "Everything okay?" he asked, frowning slightly. I nodded, perhaps a bit too enthusiastically. "Just tired. How about I start dinner while you freshen up?" As I busied myself in the kitchen, my mind raced. Who was she? How long had this been going on? The questions swirled in my head like a tornado, threatening to sweep away everything I thought I knew about our marriage. The sound of Nathan's phone buzzing on the counter snapped me back to reality. I glanced at the screen, seeing a message preview from someone named Olivia. My stomach clenched. "Hey, Soph," Nathan called from upstairs. "Have you seen my blue shirt? The one I usually wear on Thursdays?" I froze, my hand hovering over the phone. I think it's in the wash." I managed to reply, my voice only slightly strained. "Damn," he muttered, coming down the stairs. "I wanted to wear it tomorrow for the big presentation." As he entered the kitchen, I quickly turned back to the stove, stirring a pot of pasta sauce with unnecessary vigor. "I'm sure you have other shirts that look just as nice," I said, trying to keep my tone light. Nathan came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. I stiffened involuntarily. "You okay, babe?" he asked, his breath warm on my neck. "You seem tense." I turned in his arms, forcing myself to meet his eyes. "Nathan," I began, my voice barely above a whisper, "is there something you want to tell me?" His brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" Just then his phone buzzed again. We both glanced at it, and I saw panic flicker across his face as he registered the name on the screen. "Who's Olivia?" I asked, my voice steadier now, fueled by a growing anger. Nathan's arms dropped from my waist, and he took a step back. She's just a colleague," he stammered. "We're working on a project together." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that surprised even me. "A project that requires late-night text messages and lipstick on your collar?" The color drained from Nathan's face. "Sophie, I can explain." "Save it," I cut him off, holding up a hand. "I don't want to hear your excuses right now." I turned off the stove and grabbed my purse from the counter. "I'm going to my dad's for a while. Don't wait up." As I walked out the door, leaving Nathan calling after me, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, hurt, and betrayal. Yes, but also a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in our marriage, I held the upper hand. Driving to my father's house, I realized this was just the beginning. Nathan's betrayal had awakened something in me, a determination to reclaim my life and my dignity. As I pulled into my childhood driveway, I made a silent vow. Nathan would regret the day he ever underestimated me. I spent a restless night at my father's house, tossing and turning as my mind raced with questions and plans. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't confront Nathan outright. Not yet. I needed proof, undeniable evidence of his betrayal. "You look like you've been through the ringer, sweetheart," Dad said as I stumbled into the kitchen. He pushed a steaming mug of coffee towards me. "Want to talk about it?" I shook my head, managing a weak smile. "Not yet, Dad, but thanks." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "You know I'm here when you're ready." As I sipped my coffee, a plan began to form. I'd start by tracking Nathan's movements, piecing together the puzzle of his deception. It wouldn't be easy, but I was determined. I returned home later that morning, steeling myself for the confrontation. Nathan was waiting, his face a mask of concern and guilt. "Sophie, I'm so sorry," he began. "It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything." I held up a hand, silencing him. "Save it, Nathan. I need some time to think." His relief was palpable, and it made my blood boil. He thought he was off the hook. Over the next few days, I played the part of the dutiful, forgiving wife, but beneath the surface, I was gathering intel. I installed a tracking app on Nathan's phone while he slept, noting his frequent late nights at the office. I combed through our bank statements, finding suspicious charges at upscale restaurants and hotels. One evening, as Nathan prepared for another work dinner, I decided to follow him. I watched from my car as he met a sleek blonde outside a trendy bistro. Olivia, I presumed. My hands shook as I snapped photos with my phone. As they disappeared inside, I felt a tap on my window. I jumped, turning to see a concerned-looking woman peering in at me. "Are you okay, honey?" she asked. "You look upset." I realized tears were streaming down my face. "I'm fine," I managed, wiping my cheeks. "Just watching my husband with another woman." Her expression softened with understanding. "Oh, sweetie, I've been there. It gets better, I promise." As she walked away, her words echoed in my mind. It would get better, but not the way Nathan expected. The next day, I decided to dig deeper. While Nathan was at work, I searched his home office. In the back of a drawer, I found a burner phone. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the messages, each one a dagger to my heart. "Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. Last night was amazing. When can we do it again? I wish I could wake up next to you every morning." I was so engrossed in reading that I didn't hear the front door open. Suddenly, Nathan was there in the doorway, his face a mix of shock and anger. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded. I held up the phone, my voice surprisingly steady. "I think I should be asking you that question, Nathan." He lunged for the phone, but I dodged him, backing away. "How long?" I asked. "How long have you been lying to me?" Nathan's face crumpled. "Sophie, please. It's not what you think." "Don't you dare," I shouted, my composure finally cracking. "Don't you dare try to gaslight me, Nathan. I've seen the messages, the hotel charges. I saw you with her last night." His eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed. "You followed me?" he hissed. "What gives you the right?" "What gives me the right?" I laughed bitterly. "I'm your wife, Nathan. Or have you forgotten that in your rush to get into Olivia's bed?" We stood there, the air crackling with tension. In that moment, I saw Nathan clearly for the first time, not as the charming man I'd fallen in love with, but as the selfish, arrogant person he truly was. "This isn't over," I said quietly, pocketing the burner phone. "Not by a long shot." As I walked out of the room, leaving Nathan sputtering behind me, I felt a strange sense of calm. The truth was out, and now the real battle could begin. As I sat in my father's workshop, surrounded by the comforting smell of sawdust and varnish, memories of the past flooded my mind. I remembered the day I first met Nathan, how charming and attentive he'd been. Now, those memories felt tainted, like looking at an old photograph and realizing it had been a lie all along. "You've been awful quiet, Sophie," Dad said, setting down his sander. "Still not ready to talk about what's going on?" I sighed, running my fingers along the grain of a half-finished table. "I've been thinking about when Nathan and I first got together," I admitted. "How different things were then." Dad's face darkened. "That boy never did right by you, if you ask me." "What do you mean?" I asked, surprised by the vehemence in his voice. He hesitated, then said, "Remember that first Thanksgiving he came here? When I was showing him around the shop?" I nodded, the memory suddenly vivid. Nathan had seemed so interested in Dad's work, asking questions and admiring the craftsmanship. "Well," Dad continued, "after you went inside to help your mother, he changed. Started making snide comments about quaint little businesses and how I should sell out to some big corporation. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. He said that? Why didn't you ever tell me?" Dad shrugged, his weathered hands fidgeting with a piece of sandpaper. "You seemed happy, and I didn't want to cause trouble, but I never forgot it." As Dad spoke, other memories surfaced. Times when Nathan had made subtle digs at my family's background, always couched in jokes or backhanded compliments. How had I been so blind? "There's more," I said quietly, and found myself pouring out the whole story, the affair, the evidence I'd gathered, the confrontation. When I finished, Dad was silent for a long moment. Then he stood, walked over, and enveloped me in a bear hug. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," he murmured. "You deserve so much better." As I cried into his flannel shirt, I felt a new resolve forming. Nathan hadn't just betrayed me. He'd looked down on my family, on the hard-working people who'd raised me. That was unforgivable. Later that evening, I returned home to find Nathan waiting, a bouquet of roses in hand. "Sophie," he began, his voice pleading, "can we talk? I know I messed up, but I love you. We can work this out." I looked at the flowers, remembering all the times he'd used grand gestures to paper over his mistakes. "Put those down, Nathan," I said coldly. "We need to have an honest conversation for once." His face fell, but he set the roses aside. "Okay," he said, sinking onto the couch. "I'm listening." I took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about our relationship, about who you really are. And I realized something. You've never respected me or my family, have you?" Nathan's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about? Of course I respect." "Don't lie," I cut him off. "I know what you said to my father that first Thanksgiving. I know about all the little comments, the way you looked down on where I come from. He had the grace to look ashamed, at least. Sophie, that was years ago. I've changed. Have you?" I challenged. "Or have you just gotten better at hiding it? Because the man who could cheat on his wife and lie to her face doesn't seem very changed to me." Nathan stood, his face flushing with anger. "Now wait just a minute. You're not innocent in all this, you know. Always so focused on your family, never really fitting in with my world." His words confirmed everything I'd been thinking. "Your world," I repeated softly. "That's the problem, isn't it? There's your world, and then there's mine, and you've never really wanted to be part of mine." We stood there, the weight of years of unspoken resentments hanging between us. In that moment, I knew our marriage was over, not just because of the affair, but because of the fundamental disconnect that had always existed between us. "I want a divorce, Nathan," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside, "and I'm not going to make it easy for you." His face paled. "Sophie, don't be hasty. Think about what you're saying." But I was done listening. As I turned and walked out of the room, I felt a strange mix of sorrow and liberation. The life I'd thought I wanted was crumbling, but from the ruins, I would build something stronger, something true to who I really was. The day after I told Nathan I wanted a divorce, his parents called. I stared at the caller ID, my stomach churning. In all our years of marriage, I'd never felt truly accepted by them. Taking a deep breath, I answered, "Sophie, dear." Margaret's saccharine voice dripped through the phone. "We heard you and Nathan are having difficulties. We'd like you both to come for dinner tonight." I almost laughed at the understatement. Difficulties didn't begin to cover it, but I agreed, knowing this confrontation was inevitable. As Nathan and I drove to his parents' sprawling estate, the silence between us was deafening. I gazed out the window, remembering all the times I'd felt small and out of place in their world of country clubs and charity galas. Richard and Margaret were waiting on the front steps, perfect smiles plastered on their faces. Margaret air-kissed my cheeks, her eyes critically scanning my simple dress. "Oh, Sophie," she sighed, "I do wish you'd let me take you shopping sometime." I bit back a retort, following them inside to the formal dining room. As we sat down to a meal that probably cost more than my father made in a week, the tension was palpable. Richard cleared his throat. "Now let's discuss this misunderstanding between you two." "Misunderstanding?" I echoed, incredulous. "Your son cheated on me, repeatedly." Margaret waved a dismissive hand. "Men will be men, dear. The important thing is maintaining appearances." I felt my blood begin to boil. "Appearances? Is that all you care about?" Nathan shifted uncomfortably. "Sophie, please." "No, Nathan," I cut him off. "I want to hear what your parents think is so important about appearances." Richard leaned forward, his voice low and threatening. "Listen here, young lady. We've worked hard to build our family's reputation. We won't have you dragging the Prescott name through the mud with some tawdry divorce." "Tawdry?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Your son is the one sleeping around." Margaret skied. "Really, Sophie, there's no need for such vulgar language. Perhaps if you'd been a bit more accommodating to Nathan's needs, this wouldn't have happened." I stood up so quickly my chair toppled backward. "How dare you?" I hissed. I have bent over backwards trying to fit into your world to be the perfect wife, and this is what I get. Nathan reached for my arm. Sit down, Sophie. You're embarrassing yourself. I yanked away from him. No, Nathan, I'm done being embarrassed. I'm done trying to live up to your family's impossible standards. I turned to his parents, years of pent-up frustration pouring out. You've never accepted me, never thought I was good enough for your precious son. Well, guess what? He's not good enough for me. Richard's face turned an alarming shade of red. Now see here. But I was on a roll. No, you see here. I'm filing for divorce, and I don't give a damn about your reputation. Nathan can have Olivia, and you can have your perfect, classist little world. I'm done. I stormed out, leaving them all sputtering behind me. As I walked down the long driveway, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Nathan. Sophie, wait, he panted. You can't just walk away like this. I spun to face him. Watch me, Nathan. I've spent years trying to be someone I'm not for you and your family. No more. His face hardened. You'll regret this, Sophie. You've got nothing without me. His words hit me like a slap, but they also ignited something deep inside me. You're wrong, Nathan, I said quietly. I've got myself, and that's more than enough. As I walked away, leaving Nathan standing in his parents' driveway, I felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. I had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Back at home, I sat at our kitchen table, my hands shaking as I picked up my phone. It was time to make some calls, to a divorce lawyer, to my father, to the friends I'd neglected over the years. As I dialed the first number, I knew my life was about to change dramatically. But I was ready to reclaim my identity, my dignity, and my future. The fertility clinic waiting room was eerily quiet, filled with couples avoiding eye contact, each lost in their own private hopes and fears. I sat alone, clutching my purse, wondering how I'd ended up here again. Mrs. Prescott, the nurse called. I flinched at the name, still not used to the idea of shedding it. Dr. Patel greeted me with a sympathetic smile. Sophie, it's been a while. How are you doing? I swallowed hard. I'm going through a divorce, actually. Her eyebrows shot up. I see. And you're still interested in pursuing fertility treatments? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Was I? The truth was, I didn't know anymore. For years, trying to conceive had consumed me, defined me. Now, everything was different. I'm not sure, I admitted. I guess I just needed to know my options. Dr. Patel nodded, her expression kind. Well, let's review your test results from last time, shall we? As she pulled up my file on her computer, I found myself thinking about all the times Nathan and I had sat in this office, holding hands, putting on brave faces as we received one disappointing update after another. How much of that had been real, and how much had been just another performance for him? Sophie? Dr. Patel's voice snapped me back to the present. Are you all right? I realized there were tears streaming down my face. I'm sorry, I mumbled, reaching for a tissue. It's just a lot. She reached out, patting my hand. It's okay. This is an emotional process for everyone, even in the best of circumstances. Taking a deep breath, I asked the question that had been gnawing at me for years. Dr. Patel, was it me? Was I the reason we couldn't conceive? Her brow furrowed. Sophie, fertility issues are complex. It's rarely just one person's fault. She hesitated. Your tests always came back normal. It was Mr. Guy Prescott who had some challenges. The revelation hit me like a thunderbolt. All this time, Nathan had let me believe it was my fault, had let me feel broken, inadequate. The injustice of it burned in my chest. He never told me, I whispered. Dr. Patel looked confused. He assured me he'd discussed it with you. Sophie, I'm so sorry. I assumed you knew. I stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over my chair. I have to go. I'm sorry. I can't be here right now. I fled the clinic, gasping for air as soon as I hit the sidewalk. My phone buzzed in my purse, a text from Nathan. Where are you? We need to talk about the house. Anger surged through me. How dare he act like everything was normal, like he hadn't been lying to me for years about something so fundamental. Before I could stop myself, I was dialing his number. He answered on the second ring. Sophie? What's going on? You bastard, I hissed. You let me think it was my fault we couldn't have a baby. Wes, do you have any idea what that did to me? There was a long pause. When Nathan spoke again, his voice was cold. Who told you? It doesn't matter, I snapped. What matters is that you lied. Again, about something huge. I was protecting you, he said, but his tone was defensive. I didn't want you to feel. Don't you dare try to justify this, I cut him off. You weren't protecting me. You were protecting your ego. I ended the call, my hands shaking. As I stood there on the sidewalk, passers-by giving me concerned looks, I felt something shift inside me. The last lingering doubt, the tiny part of me that had wondered if I was making a mistake by leaving Nathan, evaporated. My phone buzzed again, another text from Nathan. We need to talk, come home. I stared at the message, a strange calm settling over me. Home. That house hadn't felt like home in a long time. Maybe it never really had. With sudden clarity, I knew what I had to do. It was time to stop reacting to Nathan's lies and manipulations, time to take control of my own story. I texted back a single word, no. Then I called my father. Dad, I need your help with something. It's time for me to make a fresh start. As I walked away from the fertility clinic, I felt lighter than I had in years. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it felt full of possibility. I stood in front of the charming 2-story house, my father beaming beside me. The fresh paint gleamed in the sunlight, and flower boxes hung from every window. It was perfect. Well, what do you think? Soft? Dad asked, barely containing his excitement. It's beautiful, Dad, I breathed, but I can't possibly accept. He waved away my protests. Nonsense. I've been saving this lot for years, waiting for the right moment. And with everything you're going through, well, I thought you and Nathan could use a fresh start. My heart clenched at the mention of Nathan's name. Dad didn't know about the divorce yet. I hadn't found the courage to tell him. And now, faced with his incredible generosity, the words stuck in my throat. Let's go inside, Dad said, pulling out a set of keys. Wait till you see the kitchen. As we toured the house, my mind raced. How could I tell him the truth now? How could I break his heart after he'd poured so much love and effort into this gift? My phone buzzed insistently in my pocket. Nathan, again. I'd been dodging his calls since our confrontation about the fertility treatments, but I knew I couldn't avoid him forever. Everything okay? Dad asked, noticing my distraction. I forced a smile. Just work stuff. Don't worry about it. We were in the master bedroom when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Looking out the window, my stomach dropped. Nathan's sleek black car was pulling up. Dad, I said urgently, I need to tell you something. But it was too late. Nathan's voice boomed from downstairs. Hello? Anyone home? Dad's face lit up. Perfect timing. Now we can surprise both of you together. Before I could stop him, he was heading downstairs. I followed, my heart pounding. Nathan stood in the entryway, his eyes widening as he took in the house. When he saw me, his expression hardened. Sophie, finally decided to answer my calls, I see. Dad looked between us, confusion creeping into his features. Is everything all right? Nathan's charm switched on like a light. Of course, sir, just a little miscommunication. What's all this about? As Dad launched into an explanation about the house, I watched Nathan's face. I could see the calculations happening behind his eyes, the dollar signs practically visible. This is incredibly generous, Nathan said smoothly. We can't thank you enough. We need to talk, I hissed, pulling Nathan aside while Dad busied himself in the kitchen. About what? Nathan asked innocently. About how you've been avoiding me? Or about how you're clearly hiding things from your father? I felt my anger rising. Don't you dare try to turn this around on me. You're the one who's been lying for years. Nathan's voice dropped to a menacing whisper. Careful, Sophie. You wouldn't want to make a scene in front of Daddy, would you? Especially after such a generous gift. I recoiled, seeing the true Nathan emerge. Manipulative, cruel, and utterly self-serving. Everything okay in here? Dad called from the kitchen. Fine, we both answered in unison, plastering on fake smiles. As we rejoined my father, Nathan slipped his arm around my waist, playing the part of the devoted husband. I felt sick. So, when can we move in? Nathan asked eagerly. Dad beamed. As soon as you'd like. I've already had the utilities set up in your names. I felt the walls closing in. This house, meant to be a symbol of love and new beginnings, was quickly becoming a trap. Actually, Dad, I started, my voice shaking. There's something I need to tell you. Nathan squeezed my waist painfully. What Sophie means is, we're overwhelmed with gratitude. Aren't we, darling? I looked between my father's hopeful face and Nathan's warning glare. In that moment, I realized the true cost of staying silent, of playing along with Nathan's charade. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about protecting my father, about standing up for the truth. Taking a deep breath, I stepped away from Nathan. "No," I said firmly, "that's not what I mean at all." Both men stared at me, shock evident on their faces. I squared my shoulders, ready to finally speak my truth, no matter the consequences. "Dad, Nathan and I are getting a divorce, and there's a lot more you need to know." The silence that followed my declaration was deafening. Dad's face crumpled in confusion, while Nathan's eyes blazed with fury. "What are you talking about, Sophie?" Dad asked, his voice trembling. Nathan stepped forward, his charm cranked to maximum. "Now, Sophie, let's not be hasty. We're just going through a rough patch." "No," I cut him off, my voice stronger than I felt. "No more lies, Nathan. Dad deserves to know the truth." I turned to my father, my heart breaking at the hurt in his eyes. "Dad, Nathan's been cheating on me, for months, maybe years, with a woman from his office named Olivia." Nathan's facade cracked. "You can't prove anything," he snarled. "Actually, I can," I replied, pulling out my phone. "I have texts, photos, hotel receipts, but that's not even the worst of it. I told them everything about the fertility treatments, about Nathan's lies, about his family's constant belittling." With each revelation, Dad's face grew darker, while Nathan's turned an alarming shade of red. When I finished, Dad stepped between us, his voice low and dangerous. "Is this true, Nathan?" Nathan's eyes darted between us, calculating. Then, shockingly, he laughed. "So what if it is? You really think your precious little girl is so innocent? She's been snooping through my things, following me around like some kind of stalker, and now she's trying to manipulate you with this sob story." I felt like I'd been slapped. "How dare you?" "No, how dare you?" Nathan shot back. "You think you can just throw away everything we've built over a few harmless indiscretions?" "Harmless?" I echoed, incredulous. "You've been lying to me our entire marriage." Nathan's face twisted into a sneer. "And what about this house, Sophie? Were you planning on telling your father you want a divorce before or after you accepted his generous gift?" Dad held up his hands. "Now wait just a minute." But Nathan was on a roll. "You know what? I think I deserve this house. After putting up with your family's working-class drama for years, it's the least I'm owed." Something inside me snapped. All the pain, all the humiliation, all the years of trying to be good enough, it all came pouring out. "You don't deserve anything," I hissed. "Not this house, not me, not one single thing my family has given you." I turned to Dad, tears streaming down my face. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I should have told you sooner. I was just ashamed and scared." Dad pulled me into a fierce hug. "Oh, sweetheart, you have nothing to be ashamed of." Nathan scoffed. "How touching. Well, I hope you're both prepared for a fight, because I'm not walking away from this empty-handed." As if on cue, a car pulled up outside. We all turned to see a sleek convertible, Olivia at the wheel. Nathan's eyes widened in panic. "Olivia?" She stepped out of the car, confusion evident on her face. "You texted me to meet you here. Said you had a surprise." Her eyes darted between us. "What's going on?" I felt a surge of unexpected pity for her. "He's been lying to you too, Olivia. Just like he's been lying to all of us." Nathan's composure finally shattered. "You're all insane. I don't have to stand here and listen to this." He stormed towards Olivia's car, but Dad blocked his path. "Oh no, you don't. You're not going anywhere until we sort this out." Nathan's face contorted with rage. He shoved my father, hard. Dad stumbled, nearly falling. Before I knew what was happening, I was between them, my hand connecting with Nathan's face in a resounding slap. The shock of it seemed to freeze time. We all stood there, breathing heavily, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on us. In that moment, I realized this was it, the point of no return. Whatever happened next would change all of our lives forever. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. "Nathan," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me, "I think it's time we finish this, once and for all." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings, heated arguments, and painful revelations. But as I sat in the courtroom, waiting for the judge to deliver her final verdict on our divorce proceedings, I felt an unexpected calm. Nathan's lawyer had fought tooth and nail, trying to claim half of everything, including the house my father had gifted us. But I had come prepared. The evidence I had gathered of Nathan's infidelity, combined with the testimony of his own parents about his behavior, had painted a damning picture. In the matter of Sophie Adams versus Nathan Prescott, the judge began, her voice echoing in the silent courtroom. I held my breath, feeling my father's reassuring hand on my shoulder. As the judge read out her decision, I watched Nathan's face. With each ruling, the division of assets, the nullification of his claim on my father's gift, the alimony payments he would owe, his arrogant mask crumbled a little more. When it was over, Nathan stormed out without a word, but I felt no satisfaction in his defeat. Instead, I felt free. Outside the courthouse, I was surprised to see Olivia waiting. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "I'm sorry," she said simply. "I didn't know about any of it. The lies, the manipulation. I feel like such a fool." I nodded, understanding all too well. "We both were, Olivia, but not anymore." As she walked away, I turned to my father. "Dad, I can't thank you enough for everything you've done." He pulled me into a bear hug. "That's what family is for, sweetheart. Now, what do you say we go home?" Home. The word held new meaning now. Not the cold, pristine house I had shared with Nathan, always feeling like an outsider, but the warm, loving home of my childhood, where I could heal and rediscover myself. Over the next few months, I threw myself into helping with Dad's construction business. The work was hard, but satisfying. With each house we built or renovated, I felt like I was rebuilding a part of myself. One crisp autumn day, as we finished up a project, Dad turned to me with a twinkle in his eye. "You know, Soph, you've got a real knack for this. Ever thought about taking over the business someday?" The idea took root, growing stronger with each passing day. I enrolled in business classes at the local community college, determined to learn everything I could. A year to the day after my divorce was finalized, I stood in front of a mirror, hardly recognizing the woman looking back at me. Gone was the meek, insecure housewife. In her place stood a confident businesswoman, ready to take on the world. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "Big meeting today. You've got this, kiddo." I smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude for his unwavering support. As I drove to the meeting, a potential major contract that could take our family business to the next level, I passed by my old neighborhood. There, on the corner, was Nathan. He looked older, tired. For a moment, our eyes met through the car window. I saw a flicker of recognition, then regret, pass over his face. But I felt no anger, no desire for further revenge. Nathan's true punishment was living with the consequences of his actions. My revenge, if you could call it that, was living my best life without him. As I pulled up to the office building for my meeting, I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment I'd been working towards. But more than that, it was a symbol of how far I'd come. I thought back to that day in the new house when I'd finally found the courage to speak my truth. It had been terrifying, but it had also been the first step towards reclaiming my life. Stepping out of the car, I straightened my jacket and lifted my chin. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them. Because now I knew my own strength, and nothing, not Nathan, not his family, not society's expectations, could ever take that away from me again. With a smile on my face and determination in my heart, I walked into the building, ready to write the next chapter of my story, on my own terms. The clock on the wall ticked mercilessly, each second a reminder of the bomb I was about to drop. I smoothed my blouse, trying to calm my nerves as I sat at the ornate dining table in my mother-in-law's house. The diagnosis echoed in my mind. Leukemia, 2 years to live. How does one share such news? "Jordan, dear, you've barely touched your food," Marianne, my mother-in-law, said with saccharine concern. "Is everything all right?" I forced a smile. "Actually, I have something important to discuss with everyone." Adrian, my husband, barely looked up from his phone. "Can it wait, honey? I've got a work crisis brewing." Before I could respond, Lucia, my sister-in-law, chimed in. "Oh, Jordan always has something to discuss. It's probably about redecorating the guest room again." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "It's not about decorating. It's about my health." "Speaking of health," Marianne interrupted, her eyes gleaming with malice, "we need to discuss something with you, Jordan." The air in the room shifted, tension crackling like static electricity. Adrian finally put down his phone, exchanging a loaded glance with his mother. "What's going on?" I asked, my own news momentarily forgotten. Adrian cleared his throat. "Jordan, we We know about your affair. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. What? I've never. Don't lie, Lucia hissed. We have proof. My mind reeled. This had to be some kind of sick joke. What proof? There is no affair. Marianne produced an envelope, sliding it across the table. Photos, my dear, of you and that handsome doctor from the hospital. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside were grainy photos of me talking to Dr. Stevens, my oncologist, the same doctor who had delivered my devastating diagnosis just days ago. This is ridiculous, I said, my voice rising. He's my doctor. I've been seeing him because... Save it. Adrian cut me off. We've suspected for months. The late-night phone calls, the secretive appointments. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Here I was, prepared to share the most terrifying news of my life, and instead I was being ambushed with false accusations. You want to know the truth? I said, my fear morphing into anger. I have leukemia. That's why I've been seeing Dr. Stevens. I have 2 years to live. The room fell silent. Marianne's smug expression faltered. Lucia's mouth hung open, and Adrian looked more annoyed than concerned. Oh, come on, he scoffed. You expect us to believe that? It's awfully convenient timing, don't you think? His words cut deeper than any knife. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I can't believe this. I came here tonight to lean on my family for support, and instead I'm being accused of infidelity? If you're really sick, Lucia said, her voice dripping with skepticism, prove it. I stared at them, these people who were supposed to love and support me. In that moment, I saw them clearly for the first time, selfish, manipulative, cruel. You know what? I said, grabbing my purse. I don't owe you any proof. I don't owe you anything. As I headed for the door, Adrian called out, Jordan, don't be dramatic. Come back and let's discuss this rationally. I turned back, meeting his gaze. There's nothing to discuss. I may only have 2 years left, but I refuse to spend them with people who treat me like this. With that, I walked out, slamming the door behind me. As I got into my car, tears streaming down my face, I realized something. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of my fight, not just against cancer, but against the toxic family that had belittled and doubted me for far too long. I started the engine, my mind racing. I had evidence of my own, photos, records, years of documented abuse and infidelity. It was time to use it. It was time for justice. As I drove away from the house that had never truly been my home, I made a vow. I might be dying, but I was far from defeated. They had no idea what was coming. As I drove away from Adrian's family home, memories flooded my mind. How had we gone from a fairy tale romance to this nightmare? I found myself transported back to the day we first met, 6 years ago. The autumn leaves crunched under my feet as I hurried across the university campus, arms full of books. I wasn't watching where I was going and collided with someone, sending my papers flying. I'm so sorry, a deep voice said. I looked up to see the most handsome man I'd ever laid eyes on. He smiled, and I felt my heart skip a beat. No, it's my fault, I stammered, bending to gather my scattered notes. He knelt beside me, helping. I'm Adrian, he said, handing me a stack of papers. Jordan, I replied, our fingers brushing as I took them. From that moment, we were inseparable. Adrian was charming, attentive, and seemed to genuinely care about my dreams and aspirations. We'd spend hours talking about everything and nothing. When he proposed a year later, I thought I was living a dream. The wedding was perfect, just like Adrian. But as soon as we returned from our honeymoon, it was as if a switch had been flipped. Jordan, darling, Adrian called from the living room of our new home. Mother's coming for dinner. Be a dear and whip something up, will you? I frowned, setting down my briefcase. I'd just gotten home from a long day at work. Adrian, I'm exhausted. Can't we order in? He appeared in the doorway, his expression dark. My mother doesn't eat order-in food. You know that. I sighed, too tired to argue. Fine. I'll figure something out. That was the first of many such incidents. Adrian's family became a constant presence in our lives, and with them came a slow erosion of the man I thought I'd married. One evening, about 6 months into our marriage, I overheard a conversation that chilled me to the bone. Adrian, darling, Marianne's voice drifted from the study. You've done well. Jordan's family money will set us up nicely. I froze outside the door, hardly daring to breathe. Adrian chuckled. It wasn't hard, Mother. She's so naive, so eager to please. A few pretty words, and she was putty in my hands. Just make sure you keep her in line, Lucia chimed in. We can't have her getting any ideas about independence. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. The man I loved, the family I thought I'd joined. It had all been a lie? From that day forward, I started paying closer attention. I noticed the way Adrian's eyes lingered on other women, the mysterious late-night phone calls, the way his family constantly belittled and undermined me. I tried to confront Adrian once about a lipstick stain I'd found on his collar. Don't be ridiculous, Jordan, he scoffed. You're imagining things. Maybe you should see a therapist about your paranoia. But I wasn't imagining things, and deep down, I knew it. I started keeping a journal, documenting every suspicious incident, every cruel word from his family. I didn't know why at the time. Maybe I was trying to convince myself I wasn't crazy. Now, as I pulled into the driveway of my own home, I realized those meticulous notes might be my salvation. I rushed inside, heading straight for the hidden compartment in my closet where I kept my evidence. As I pulled out the stack of notebooks and photos, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Adrian. Where are you? Come home now. We need to talk. I stared at the message, my hands shaking. For a moment, I considered going back, trying to explain to make them understand. But then I remembered the cold dismissal in Adrian's eyes when I told him about my diagnosis. No, I was done explaining, done trying to make them understand. It was time for action. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd saved months ago but never had the courage to use. Hello. Is this Davis & Associates law firm? I'd like to schedule a consultation about filing for divorce. As I hung up, I felt a mix of terror and exhilaration. There was no going back now. The battle had begun, and I was determined to win, not just for myself, but for every person who'd ever been manipulated and gaslit by those who were supposed to love them. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a war that would test every ounce of my strength and resilience. The morning after my decision to file for divorce, I woke up feeling both liberated and terrified. I had barely slept, my mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. As I stumbled into the kitchen for coffee, my phone buzzed incessantly. Missed calls and messages from Adrian, Marianne, and Lucia flooded my screen. I ignored them all and dialed my mother instead. Mom, I need to see you. Can I come over? An hour later, I sat at my mother's kitchen table, pouring out everything. My diagnosis, Adrian's betrayal, and my decision to leave. Oh, sweetheart, Mom said, her eyes brimming with tears. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm so sorry. I knew something was wrong, but I had no idea. I should have told you sooner, I admitted. I wanted to believe I could fix things. Before she could respond, my phone rang. Adrian's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered on speaker. Jordan, where the hell are you? Adrian's voice was a mixture of anger and panic. You can't just run off like this. We need to talk about what happened last night. There's nothing to talk about, Adrian, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm done. Done? What do you mean, done? His tone shifted, becoming cajoling. Baby, I know we said some things in the heat of the moment, but we can work this out. Come home, and we'll figure it out together. I almost laughed at the audacity. Figure what out, Adrian? How you and your family have been manipulating me for years? Or maybe how you've been cheating on me? There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. I don't know what you think you know, but I know everything. I cut him off, and I have proof, so don't bother lying anymore. Silence stretched for a moment before Adrian's voice came back, cold and hard. You're making a big mistake, Jordan. You have no idea what you're up against. The line went dead. I looked at my mother, whose face had gone pale. Jordan, she said softly, are you sure about this? Adrian's family is powerful. They could make things very difficult for you. I nodded, a grim smile on my face. I'm sure, Mom. I'm done being their victim. Just then, a loud banging at the front door made us both jump. Jordan, Marianne's shrill voice carried through the house. I know you're in there. Open this door right now. My mother and I exchanged alarmed glances. The banging continued, accompanied now by Lucia's voice. You can't hide from us, you ungrateful little bitch. My hands shook as I dialed 911. Hello? Yes, I need help. There are people trying to break into my mother's house. As I gave the dispatcher the address, I heard a loud crash. Marianne and Lucia had broken through the front door. There you are. Marianne snarled as she stormed into the kitchen, Lucia right behind her. "How dare you accuse my son of infidelity? After everything we've done for you." I stood my ground, even as fear coursed through me. "Everything you've done for me? You mean belittle me, manipulate me, and treat me like dirt?" Lucia lunged forward, her hand raised to strike me, but my mother intercepted, grabbing her wrist. "Don't you dare touch my daughter," she growled. The room erupted into chaos. Shouting, threats, the sound of breaking dishes. Through it all, I stood rooted to the spot, a strange calm washing over me. This, I realized, was the moment I'd been waiting for. The moment to finally stand up for myself. As sirens wailed in the distance, I locked eyes with Marianne. "You and your family have controlled my life for too long," I said, my voice steady and clear. "But not anymore. I'm taking back control, and I'm going to make sure you pay for everything you've done." The look of shock and fear that flashed across Marianne's face told me everything I needed to know. The battle lines were drawn, and for the first time, I knew I had the upper hand. As the police burst through the door, I felt a surge of strength. My fight wasn't just for myself anymore. It was for every person who'd ever been trapped in a toxic relationship, every victim of gaslighting and emotional abuse. And I was determined to win, no matter the cost. The days following the confrontation at my mother's house were a whirlwind. I'd moved back in with her temporarily, grateful for her unwavering support as I navigated the stormy waters ahead. Today, I sat at her dining room table, surrounded by stacks of documents, the fruits of my secret labor over the past few years. "I can't believe you've been collecting all this," Mom said, leafing through a folder of photographs. "Adrian with all these different women. It's despicable." I nodded grimly. "And that's just the tip of the iceberg." I pulled out another file, this one filled with financial records. "Look at this. Marianne's been embezzling from her own charity for years. And here I pointed to a series of transactions. Adrian's been helping her launder the money." Mom's eyes widened. "Jordan, this is serious. Have you shown this to your lawyer?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "I know what you're doing. Meet me at Riverside Park in an hour if you want the full story." My heart raced. Could this be a trap? Or was it someone with insider information? "I have to go," I told Mom, grabbing my coat. I might have a lead. Despite her protests, I headed out. The park was quiet when I arrived, save for a few joggers and dog walkers. I scanned the area, my nerves on high alert. "Jordan," a familiar voice called out. I turned to see Sarah, Adrian's assistant, approaching cautiously. "Sarah, you sent that text?" She nodded, glancing around nervously. "I don't have much time. Adrian doesn't know I'm here." "What's going on?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. Sarah took a deep breath. "I've been working for Adrian for 5 years. At first, I thought he was just a typical demanding boss, but then I started noticing things. The late-night meetings, the mysterious phone calls, the way he'd ask me to adjust certain financial records." My stomach churned. "Go on." "Last week, I overheard a conversation between Adrian and his mother. They were talking about you, about your diagnosis." Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. "Jordan, they knew. They've known about your leukemia for months." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "What? How is that possible?" "Adrian's been having your medical records monitored. When he found out about your diagnosis, he and Marianne saw it as an opportunity. They've been planning to contest your inheritance, claiming you weren't of sound mind when you made your will." Rage boiled inside me. "Those bastards, they were going to use my illness against me?" Sarah nodded, her eyes filled with sympathy. "There's more. They've been systematically draining your personal accounts. I have proof." She handed me a USB drive. "Everything's on here. Financial records, recorded conversations, emails. It's all the evidence you need to bring them down." I clutched the drive, my mind reeling. "Sarah, why are you doing this? You could lose your job." She smiled sadly. "Because what they're doing is wrong, and because I've seen how they've treated you. You deserve better, Jordan." As Sarah walked away, I stood frozen, the weight of the USB drive heavy in my hand. This was it. The key to destroying Adrian and his family once and for all. But using it would mean war, a brutal legal battle that would consume what little time I had left. I thought about Adrian, about the love we once shared and how it had twisted into something ugly and cruel. I thought about Marianne and Lucia, about years of subtle jabs and not-so-subtle humiliations. I thought about my mother, always my steadfast supporter, and how she'd stand by me no matter what I chose. Finally, I thought about myself, the woman I used to be, the woman I'd become, and the woman I wanted to be in the time I had left. In that moment, standing alone in the park with the evidence of years of betrayal in my hand, I made my decision. It was time to fight back, to reclaim my life and my dignity. Adrian and his family had no idea what was coming. With renewed determination, I pulled out my phone and dialed my lawyer. "It's Jordan. I have something you need to see. Let's end this once and for all." The morning after my meeting with Sarah, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. I'd spent half the night going through the files on the USB drive, each revelation stoking the fire of my determination. Today was the day I'd leave Adrian and his toxic family behind for good. I packed my bags quietly, not wanting to wake my mother just yet. As I zipped up the last suitcase, I heard a soft knock at my door. "Jordan?" Mom's voice was thick with concern. "Are you sure about this?" I turned to face her, seeing the worry etched on her face. "I have to do this, Mom. I can't stay in that house another day." She nodded, pulling me into a tight embrace. "I know, sweetheart. I wish things were different." "Me too," I whispered, fighting back tears. "But I'm going to make them different. Starting now." As we loaded my car, I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. I was leaving behind the life I'd known for years, but I was also stepping into a future where I could finally be free. The drive to Adrian's house, our house, was tense. I rehearsed what I'd say, how I'd stand my ground against the inevitable storm of manipulation and gaslighting, but nothing could have prepared me for what I found when I arrived. The front door was ajar, and I could hear raised voices from inside. Cautiously, I stepped in, my heart pounding. "You idiot!" Marianne's shrill voice echoed from the living room. "How could you let this happen?" I peered around the corner to see Adrian, Marianne, and Lucia huddled around a laptop, their faces pale with panic. "I didn't know she was keeping records," Adrian hissed. "How was I supposed to know?" "You should have known," Lucia snapped. "Jordan's always been too smart for her own good." I cleared my throat, and 3 heads whipped around to face me. The look of shock on their faces would have been comical if the situation wasn't so serious. "Jordan," Adrian stammered, quickly closing the laptop. We didn't hear you come in." "Clearly," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm here to collect my things. I'm leaving." Marianne's eyes narrowed. "Leaving? Don't be ridiculous. Where would you go?" "That's none of your concern," I replied, moving towards the stairs. "I'll be out of your hair in an hour." Adrian grabbed my arm as I passed. "Jordan, wait, we need to talk about this. About everything." I yanked my arm away, fury rising in my chest. "There's nothing to talk about, Adrian. I know everything. About your affairs, about the embezzlement, about how you've been planning to use my illness against me." The color drained from his face. How did you... "It doesn't matter how I know," I cut him off. "What matters is that it's over. All of it." As I turned to go upstairs, Lucia's voice stopped me cold. "If you leave now, you'll regret it. We'll make sure you don't see a penny of your inheritance." I spun around, locking eyes with her. "Is that a threat, Lucia?" She smirked, confidence oozing from every pore. "It's a promise. You're sick, Jordan. Who's going to believe you over us? We'll have you declared mentally incompetent before you can blink." In that moment, something inside me snapped. All the fear, all the doubt, all the years of manipulation, they crystallized into a diamond-hard resolve. "You have no idea what's coming," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I have evidence of everything you've done, every affair, every stolen dollar, every lie, and I'm not afraid to use it." The smug expressions on their faces faltered, replaced by a flicker of fear. "You're bluffing," Marianne said, but her voice wavered. I pulled out my phone, queuing up one of the recorded conversations from Sarah's USB drive. As Adrian's voice filled the room, discussing plans to drain my accounts, I watched their faces crumble. "This is just the beginning," I said, stopping the playback. "I'm going to take everything from you, just like you tried to take everything from me." As I climbed the stairs to pack my things, I heard frantic whispers behind me. They were scrambling, panicking, realizing that their carefully constructed house of cards was about to come crashing down. And I, Jordan Hastings, would be the one to blow it all away. The weeks following my departure from Adrian's house were a whirlwind of legal meetings, doctor's appointments, and soul-searching. I'd moved in with my mother, her unwavering support a balm to my battered spirit. But today marked a new chapter in my journey. "Are you ready for this, sweetheart?" Mom asked as we stood outside the yoga studio. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my illness and the looming legal battle. As ready as I'll ever be. The yoga instructor, a serene woman named Lily, greeted us warmly. "Jordan, Amelia, welcome. Let's begin our journey to healing." As we moved through the poses, I felt a spark of something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. With each stretch and breath, it was as if I was shedding the layers of pain and betrayal Adrian and his family had wrapped around me. After class, Mom and I stopped at a local organic cafe. "I never thought I'd say this," I laughed, sipping a green smoothie, "but I actually feel good." Mom's eyes welled with tears. "Oh, Jordan, you have no idea how long I've waited to hear you say that." Our moment of peace was shattered by the shrill ring of my phone. My lawyer's name flashed on the screen. "Jordan," he said, his voice tense. "We have a problem. Adrian's lawyers are pushing for an emergency hearing. They're claiming you're mentally unfit to proceed with a divorce due to your illness." My hand clenched around the phone. "What? They can't do that." "They're trying. And Jordan, they're also contesting your inheritance, claiming you changed your will under duress." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Everything I'd been fighting for was suddenly at risk. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We fight," he replied firmly. "But Jordan, I need you to be prepared. This is going to get ugly." As I hung up, I met my mother's worried gaze. "They're trying to take everything, Mom. My divorce, my inheritance, they want to leave me with nothing." She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Then we won't let them. We'll fight this together." Over the next few days, we threw ourselves into preparation. I met with my oncologist, securing detailed reports on my mental acuity. We gathered character witnesses, financial records, everything we could to prove I was of sound mind and body. But the stress was taking its toll. My body, already weakened by the leukemia, began to rebel. Fatigue set in, deeper than I'd ever experienced. Nosebleeds became frequent, bruises blooming on my skin at the slightest touch. The night before the hearing, I found myself hunched over the toilet, violently ill. Mom held my hair back, her touch gentle but her voice firm. "Jordan, you need to go to the hospital. This is too much for your body right now." I shook my head, wiping my mouth with a trembling hand. "I can't. If I go to the hospital now, Adrian and his lawyers will use it against me. They'll say I'm too sick to make my own decisions." "But sweetheart, your health." "My health doesn't matter if they take everything from me," I snapped, immediately regretting my harsh tone. "I'm sorry, Mom. I can't let them win. Not after everything they've done." As I struggled to my feet, a wave of dizziness washed over me. I clutched the sink, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was pale, gaunt, with dark circles under her eyes. But in those eyes, I saw a fire that refused to be extinguished. "I have to do this," I whispered, more to myself than to my mother. "I have to show Adrian and his family that they can't break me, that no matter what they throw at me, I'm stronger." Mom wrapped her arms around me, her embrace a silent promise of support. As we stood there, I felt a resolve hardening within me. Tomorrow, I would face Adrian and his army of lawyers. I would stand before a judge and fight for my right to make my own choices, to control my own destiny. And no matter what happened, I would not let them see me falter. Because this wasn't just about money or divorce anymore. This was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my future, however long or short it might be. As I finally crawled into bed that night, exhaustion settling into my bones, I made a silent vow. Tomorrow, win or lose, I would show the world, and myself, exactly what Jordan Hastings was made of. The day of reckoning arrived with a startling clarity. As I sat in my mother's living room, surrounded by stacks of legal documents and medical reports, my phone buzzed with an incoming video call. Adrian's name flashed on the screen. My hand trembled as I answered, my mother's reassuring presence beside me. Adrian's face filled the screen, flanked by Marianne and Lucia. They looked haggard, desperate, a far cry from the polished, confident facades they usually presented. "Jordan," Adrian began, his voice a mixture of pleading and frustration, We need to talk. This has gone too far. I steeled myself, drawing strength from the weeks of yoga, clean eating, and meditation. I'm listening, Adrian, but make it quick. Marianne leaned forward, her eyes narrowed. Jordan, dear, we're worried about you. This stress can't be good for your condition. Why don't we settle this amicably? I almost laughed at the audacity. Amicably? After everything you've done? Now, Jordan, Lucia chimed in, her tone sickly sweet. Let's not be hasty. We're family, after all. Family? I spat the word out. Is that what you call people you manipulate and abuse? Adrian's face contorted with anger. Watch it, Jordan. You have no idea what you're up against. No, Adrian, I countered, my voice steady. You have no idea what you're up against. I know everything. Your affairs, Marianne's embezzlement, Lucia's part in covering it all up. I have proof of it all. The color drained from their faces. Marianne was the first to recover, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. You're bluffing. You couldn't possibly. Would you like me to start with the offshore accounts, Marianne? Or perhaps Adrian's little rendezvous with his secretary? Oh, and Lucia, let's not forget your creative accounting at the family business. Silence fell over the call. I could almost hear the gears turning in their heads, desperately trying to find a way out. What do you want? Adrian finally asked, defeat evident in his voice. I leaned closer to the screen, my heart pounding. I want a divorce, Adrian. I want every penny you've stolen from me, and I want you and your family to never ever contact me again. Lucia scoffed. And if we refuse? Then I'll see you in court, I replied calmly. Every dirty secret, every illegal transaction, every lie, it'll all come out. Are you prepared for that? The panic in their eyes told me everything I needed to know. They were cornered, and they knew it. You can't do this, Marianne hissed. We'll destroy you. I felt a surge of strength, years of pent-up anger and hurt fueling my words. You've tried to destroy me for years, Marianne. You've belittled me, manipulated me, tried to use my illness against me. But guess what? I'm still here, and I'm stronger than ever. Adrian's face filled the screen, his expression a mix of anger and desperation. Jordan, please, we can work this out. I still love you. For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old pain, remembering the man I thought I had married, but it passed quickly, replaced by a steely resolve. No, Adrian, you don't love me. You never did. But that's okay because I don't need your love anymore. I don't need anything from any of you. With that, I ended the call, my hand shaking as I set down the phone. Mom wrapped her arms around me, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. You did it, sweetheart, she whispered. You stood up to them. As the adrenaline wore off, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. The room began to spin, and I clutched at my mother's arm. Mom, I gasped. I don't feel so good. The last thing I saw before the darkness closed in was my mother's panicked face as she reached for her phone to call an ambulance. In that moment, hovering on the edge of consciousness, I realized that while I might have won the battle against Adrian and his family, the war with my own body was far from over. And as the sound of sirens filled the air, I wondered if I had the strength left for one final fight. The harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital room buzzed overhead as I slowly regained consciousness. My mother's worried face swam into view, her hand clasping mine tightly. Jordan, sweetie, can you hear me? Her voice trembled. I nodded weakly, the simple movement sending waves of pain through my body. What happened? You collapsed, she explained, her eyes brimming with tears. The doctors say the leukemia has progressed faster than expected. The gravity of the situation settled over me like a heavy blanket. I'd known this day was coming, but I'd hoped for more time. More time to fight, more time to live. As if sensing my thoughts, Mom squeezed my hand. Your lawyer is here. He says it's urgent. I nodded, and she helped me sit up as my lawyer entered the room, a solemn expression on his face. Jordan, he began, I have news. Adrian and his family have agreed to all your terms. The divorce papers are ready. But what? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated. Given your condition, we need to finalize everything as soon as possible. Today, if you're up for it. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of the moment wash over me. This was it. The culmination of everything I'd fought for. Bring me the papers, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. As I signed my name on the dotted line, I felt a strange mix of triumph and sadness. This was the end of a chapter in my life, but also the beginning of the end. Just as I finished, a commotion outside caught our attention. Adrian's voice, loud and insistent, echoed down the hallway. "I need to see her. You can't keep me out." Mom moved to block the door, but I stopped her. "Let him in," I said. "It's time to end this, once and for all." Adrian burst into the room, his eyes wild. He looked nothing like the polished, confident man I'd married. "Jordan," he gasped, "you can't do this. We can work it out. I'll change, I promise." I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing. No anger, no love, no regret. Just a profound sense of peace. "It's done, Adrian," I said softly. "The papers are signed, you're free, and so am I." He stared at me, disbelief etched on his face. "But what about us? Our life together?" I shook my head. "There is no us, Adrian. There hasn't been for a long time. And my life? It's mine, however much of it I have left." As if on cue, a wave of pain washed over me, and I gasped, clutching my side. Mom rushed to my side, while my lawyer ushered a shell-shocked Adrian out of the room. The next few days passed in a blur of pain medication, visits from friends, and quiet moments with my mother. I could feel my body failing, but my spirit remained strong. On what I somehow knew would be my last night, I asked for a moment alone with Mom. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice weak. "I wish we had more time." She brushed my hair back, her touch gentle. "Oh, my brave girl, you have nothing to be sorry for. You've lived more in these past months than most people do in a lifetime." I smiled, feeling a sense of contentment wash over me. "I did it, Mom. I stood up for myself. I didn't let them win." "No, you didn't," she agreed, her voice thick with emotion. "You showed them all what true strength looks like." As I felt myself drifting away, I thought about my journey, the pain, the betrayal, the fight. It had all led me here, to this moment of peace, of triumph, of love. With my last breath, I whispered, "I'm ready." And as the darkness closed in, I felt no fear, only a profound sense of accomplishment. I, Jordan Hastings, had faced the worst life could throw at me. A terminal illness, a betraying husband, a manipulative family, and I had emerged victorious. In the end, I hadn't just survived. I had lived, truly lived, on my own terms. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all. As I slipped away, surrounded by the love of my mother and the knowledge that I had reclaimed my life and my dignity, I felt a sense of peace I had never known before. My story, with all its pain and triumph, would live on, a testament to the power of resilience, self-love, and the indomitable human spirit. The buzzing of my phone jolted me awake. I fumbled in the dark, my heart racing as I squinted at the bright screen. 3:17 a.m. Who could be texting at this hour? Mike's name flashed across the top, and a chill ran down my spine. I glanced over at my husband's empty side of the bed. He was working the night shift at the mall again, or so he'd said. With trembling fingers, I unlocked the phone and read the message. "Sorry, babe. Won't make it home tonight. Covering for Jim." My stomach churned. This was the third time this month he'd stayed out all night. I scrolled through his recent messages, my suspicion growing with each swipe. "Can't wait to see you again. Miss your touch. You're so beautiful." None of these were to me. I set the phone down, my hands shaking. The bedroom suddenly felt suffocating. I stumbled to the bathroom, flicking on the harsh fluorescent light. My reflection stared back at me, tired eyes and thinning hair that Mike never failed to point out. "You're being paranoid, Emily," I whispered to myself, but the knot in my stomach wouldn't loosen. A soft knock on the door made me jump. "Mom?" Kelly's voice called out. "Is everything okay?" I opened the door to find my daughter, bleary-eyed but concerned. "Sorry, sweetie. Did I wake you?" She shook her head. "I heard you get up. Is it Dad again?" The perceptiveness in her eyes made my heart ache. At 18, she shouldn't have to worry about her parents' marriage. I forced a smile. "It's nothing, honey. Go back to bed." Kelly hesitated, then said, "Mom, there's something I need to tell you about Dad." My breath caught in my throat. "What is it?" She bit her lip, looking torn. I saw him yesterday, at the coffee shop near the mall. He was with someone." "A coworker?" I asked, clinging to hope. Kelly shook her head slowly. "It was a woman I've never seen before. They looked close." The room spun around me. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. "Are you sure?" "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't want to say anything, but after seeing his text." She gestured towards the phone on my nightstand. I took a deep breath, trying to process this information. "Thank you for telling me, Kelly. We'll figure this out, okay?" She nodded, giving me a quick hug before retreating to her room. I sank onto the bed, my mind racing. After 20 years of marriage, could Mike really be cheating on me? I thought back to our arranged marriage, orchestrated by our parents who thought we'd be a perfect match. Mike, the charming janitor with big dreams, and me, the dedicated nurse. We'd made it work, or so I thought. The first rays of sunlight were peeking through the curtains when I heard the front door open. Mike's heavy footsteps echoed through the house. I steeled myself, determined to confront him. He appeared in the doorway, looking surprised to see me awake. "Emily, what are you doing up so early?" I held up his phone, my voice steadier than I felt. "Care to explain these messages, Mike?" His face paled, then quickly morphed into a mask of innocence. "What messages? You know I hate when you go through my phone." "Don't turn this around on me," I snapped. "Who is she?" Mike's jaw clenched. "It's nothing, just a friend." "A friend you can't wait to see again? A friend you miss touching?" My voice cracked, betraying my hurt. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "Look, Emily, it's not what you think. You're overreacting as usual." "As usual?" I stood up, anger replacing my sadness. "You mean like how I overreact when you constantly criticize my appearance? My thinning hair?" Mike's eyes narrowed. "Maybe if you took better care of yourself." "Stop," I cut him off. "Just stop. I want the truth, Mike. Are you having an affair?" The silence that followed was deafening. Mike's gaze dropped to the floor, and in that moment, I knew. My world shattered, leaving me standing amidst the ruins of our marriage, wondering how I'd ever put the pieces back together. The hospital corridors felt colder than usual as I made my rounds. My mind kept drifting back to Mike's half-hearted denials and the look in his eyes when I confronted him. I shook my head, trying to focus on my patients. They deserved better than a distracted nurse. "Emily?" Dr. Patel's voice snapped me back to reality. "Are you all right? You seem a bit off today." I forced a smile. "I'm fine, just a bit tired. What can I do for you?" He handed me a chart. "Mrs. Well Johnson in 305 needs her meds, and Emily, if you need to talk, my door's always open." I nodded gratefully and headed to Mrs. Johnson's room. As I administered her medication, she studied me with wise, wrinkled eyes. "Trouble at home, dear?" she asked softly. I hesitated, then sighed. "Is it that obvious?" She patted my hand. "When you've been around as long as I have, you learn to read people. Don't let it dim your light, honey." Her words struck a chord. How long had I been letting Mike dim my light? I thought back to the early days of our marriage. He'd been so charming then, full of big dreams. But as the years passed, those dreams never materialized. Instead, he bounced from job to job while I worked long hours at the hospital to keep us afloat. My shift ended, and I dreaded going home. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed. A text from Mike. "Working late again. Don't wait up." I gripped the steering wheel, anger bubbling up inside me. How many nights had I heard that excuse? How many times had I rearranged my schedule to accommodate his ever-changing jobs? At home, I found Kelly in the kitchen, attempting to cook dinner. The smell of burnt pasta filled the air. "Oh, Mom," she exclaimed. "I wanted to surprise you, but I think I messed up." I couldn't help but laugh. "It's the thought that counts, sweetie. How about we order pizza instead?" As we sat eating, Kelly cleared her throat. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course, honey." "Why do you let Dad treat you the way he does?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" She set down her slice, looking serious. "The way he criticizes you all the time, especially about your hair. It's not right, Mom." I touched my thinning hair self-consciously. Mike's voice echoed in my head. "You're letting yourself go, Emily. No wonder I have to work so hard to look at you." "It's complicated, Kelly," I said weakly. "No, it's not," she insisted. "You deserve better. You're beautiful, Mom, and smart and kind. Dad's an idiot if he can't see that." Tears welled up in my eyes. When did my daughter become so wise? Just then, the front door slammed. Mike stumbled in, reeking of alcohol. "Where's my dinner?" he demanded. I stood up, anger replacing my earlier sadness. "You said you were working late. We didn't know when you'd be home." He scoffed. "Right, because it's so hard to keep a plate warm. What do you even do all day, Emily?" Kelly jumped to her feet. "She saves lives, Dad. What do you do besides criticize her?" Mike's face darkened. "Watch your tone, young lady. This is between your mother and me." "No," I said firmly, surprising myself. "Kelly's right. I'm tired of your criticism, Mike." I'm tired of feeling like I'm not enough. He laughed bitterly. Not enough? Look at yourself, Emily. Your hair's falling out, you've gained weight, you're hardly the woman I married. The words stung, but I stood my ground. And you're hardly the man I thought I married, a man who respects his wife, who contributes to his family. Mike's eyes narrowed. You want to talk about contributions? Who do you think pays for this roof over your head? I do, I shouted, years of frustration pouring out. I pay the mortgage, the bills, Kelly's tuition. What do you contribute besides empty promises and cruel words? The silence that followed was deafening. Mike stared at me, shock and anger warring on his face. Kelly looked between us, worry etched in her features. Finally, Mike spoke, his voice low and dangerous. If that's how you feel, maybe I should just leave. My heart pounded, but I held firm. Maybe you should. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. As the sound echoed through the house, I realized with startling clarity that our marriage was beyond repair. And for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window as I sipped my coffee, lost in thought. It had been 3 days since Mike stormed out, and the house felt eerily quiet without his constant criticism. Kelly shuffled in, her eyes puffy from lack of sleep. Any word from Dad? I shook my head. Nothing. But don't worry, honey, we'll be okay. She nodded, then hesitated. Mom, there's something I need to tell you about Dad. My heart sank. What is it? Kelly took a deep breath. Remember when I told you I saw him at the coffee shop? Well, I didn't tell you everything. He was with a woman, young, brunette, and they were kissing. The mug slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor. Hot coffee splashed my legs, but I barely felt it. Are you sure? Kelly nodded, tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have told you sooner. I hugged her tightly, my mind reeling. It's not your fault, sweetie. Thank you for telling me. After Kelly left for school, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at Mike's number on my phone. My finger hovered over the call button, but I couldn't bring myself to press it. Instead, I dialed another number. Ace Investigations, how can I help you? An hour later, I sat across from Jack Reeves, a private investigator with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. So, Mrs. Roberts, you suspect your husband is having an affair? I nodded, twisting my wedding ring. I need to know for sure. Can you help me? Jack leaned forward. We'll get to the bottom of this, ma'am, but I have to warn you. Are you prepared for what we might find? Was I? The thought of concrete proof made my stomach churn. But I squared my shoulders and met his gaze. Yes, I need the truth. Over the next week, I threw myself into work, trying to ignore the gnawing anxiety. Jack called with updates, each one chipping away at my hope. Mike's late nights weren't at the mall. His work trips were to a nearby hotel. Finally, Jack asked me to meet him at a cafe downtown. As I approached, I saw him sitting at an outdoor table, a thick envelope in front of him. Mrs. Roberts, he said gently, I have the evidence you asked for. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Mike with a young brunette, holding hands, kissing, entering a hotel. My vision blurred as I flipped through them. I'm sorry, Jack said softly. I nodded, unable to speak. As I gathered the photos, a familiar figure caught my eye. I froze, my blood running cold. Mrs. Roberts, are you all right? I held up one of the photos, my voice barely a whisper. I know her. Jack leaned in. The woman your husband's with. Yes, I say, anger replacing shock. It's Linda, Mike's mother. Jack's eyes widened. His mother? I shook my head, memories flooding back. Not his biological mother, his stepmother. She married Mike's father when Mike was in his 20s. She's only a few years older than him. The pieces started falling into place. Linda's hostility towards me, the knowing looks between her and Mike at family gatherings. How could I have been so blind? Mrs. Roberts, Jack said gently, what do you want to do now? I stood up, a strange calm settling over me. Now, I want a divorce. As I walked home, my phone buzzed. A text from Mike. We need to talk. I'm coming home tonight. I stared at the screen, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Part of me wanted to confront him, to scream and demand answers. But another part, a stronger part, knew it was time to take control of my life. I typed a reply, don't bother. I know about Linda. Your things will be on the porch. Don't come inside. My finger hovered over the send button. This was it, the point of no return. Taking a deep breath, I pressed send and watched as my message delivered, signaling the end of my marriage and the beginning of a new chapter in my life. As I walked up to my house, I saw Kelly waiting on the porch, concern etched on her face. I realized then that while one chapter was ending, the most important one, my life with my daughter, was still being written. And this time, I would make sure it had a happier ending. The weight of the manila envelope felt like a ton of bricks in my hands as I paced the living room. Inside were the divorce papers I had drawn up, a decision that had taken every ounce of courage I possessed. Kelly watched me from the couch, her eyes filled with a mix of concern and support. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" she asked softly. I paused, meeting her gaze. "I have to be, honey. We deserve better than this." The sound of a car pulling into the driveway made my heart race. Mike was home. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. "Kelly, why don't you go to your room?" I suggested, not wanting her to witness what was about to unfold. She hesitated, then nodded, giving me a quick hug before disappearing upstairs. The front door opened, and Mike stumbled in, reeking of alcohol. "Emily?" he called out, his words slurring slightly. "Where's my dinner?" I stepped into the hallway, the envelope clutched to my chest like a shield. "We need to talk, Mike." He squinted at me, then at the envelope. "What's that?" Without a word, I handed it to him. He fumbled with the clasp, pulling out the papers. As his eyes scanned the first page, his face contorted from confusion to shock, then anger. "Divorce papers," he spat. "What the hell is this?" "It's exactly what it looks like," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I want a divorce." Mike laughed bitterly. "You can't be serious, after everything I've done for you?" "Everything you've done?" I echoed, disbelief coloring my tone. "You mean the lies, the affairs, the constant criticism?" His eyes narrowed. "Affairs? What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone, bringing up the photos the private investigator had sent me. "I know about Linda, Mike. Your stepmother? Really?" The color drained from his face as I showed him the evidence. For a moment, he looked like he might crumple, but then his expression hardened. "You had me followed?" he growled. "You invaded my privacy?" "Don't you dare turn this around on me," I shot back. "You've been cheating on me with your stepmother. You've made me feel worthless for years. It ends now." Mike's fist slammed against the wall, making me flinch. "You can't do this to me, Emily. I was going to leave you after retirement, take my pension and start over. You're ruining everything." His words hit me like a slap in the face. "You were planning to leave me? After all these years?" He sneered. "Look at you. Your hair's falling out. You've let yourself go. Did you really think I'd stick around forever?" Something snapped inside me. Years of pent-up anger and hurt came pouring out. "I've supported us for years while you jumped from job to job. I've raised our daughter, paid our bills, and put up with your abuse. No more, Mike. It's over. You'll regret this." He snarled, crumpling the divorce papers in his fist. "I'll make sure you don't get a penny." I stood my ground, meeting his gaze. "Try it. I have evidence of your affair, your financial negligence. Do you really want to take this to court?" For a moment, fear flashed in his eyes. Then, without another word, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I sank to the floor, my legs giving out as the adrenaline faded. Kelly appeared at the top of the stairs, tears in her eyes. "Mom?" she called softly. "Are you okay?" I looked up at her, managing a small smile. "I will be, honey. We both will be." As Kelly came down to sit beside me, I realized that this wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of a new chapter for both of us, one where we wouldn't let anyone make us feel small ever again. "What happens now?" Kelly asked, leaning her head on my shoulder. I wrapped my arm around her, feeling a newfound strength coursing through me. "Now, we rebuild. Together." The shrill ring of my phone jolted me awake. Squinting at the clock, I saw it was barely 5 a.m. My heart raced as I answered, "Hello? Emily. It's Carol, your mother-in-law." Her voice was tight with worry. "Mike's here. He's not in a good state." I sat up, fully alert now. "What do you mean?" "He's drunk, ranting about divorce papers and how you're trying to ruin him. Emily, what's going on?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Carol, I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this. Mike's been having an affair with Linda." The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, Carol spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Linda? His stepmother?" "Yes," I confirmed, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. I have proof. I'm filing for divorce. Carol's sharp intake of breath was audible. Oh, Emily, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, I assured her. This isn't your fault. He wants to talk to you, Carol said suddenly. He's demanding it. Should I put him on? My instinct was to refuse, but something made me hesitate. Okay, I heard myself say. Mike's voice came through, slurred and angry. Emily, you can't do this to me. I'll fight you every step of the way. Mike, it's over, I said firmly. We both know it. You think you can just throw me away? He snarled. After everything? I made you who you are. His words hit me like a physical blow. For a moment I was that insecure young woman again, desperate for his approval. But then I thought of Kelly, of the strength I'd found in standing up to him. No, Mike, I said, my voice steady. I made myself who I am, despite you, not because of you. He laughed bitterly. You're nothing without me, Emily. Your thinning hair, I cut him off. Goodbye, Mike. Don't call again unless it's through our lawyers. I ended the call, my hands shaking. As I set the phone down, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. My hair, the source of so much of Mike's criticism, seemed to mock me. Without thinking, I grabbed a pair of scissors from my dresser. Strand by strand, I began to cut. With each snip, I felt a weight lifting. By the time Kelly found me, tear-streaked and surrounded by fallen hair, I felt lighter than I had in years. Mom? Kelly's voice was filled with concern. What happened? I turned to her, managing a small smile. I'm taking control, honey. No more letting your father's words define me. Kelly's eyes widened, then softened with understanding. She grabbed another pair of scissors. Let me help you even it out. As we worked together, I filled Kelly in on Mike's call. Her jaw clenched with anger, but she remained focused on the task at hand. You know, she said, as she trimmed the back of my hair, Aunt Sarah went through something similar with her ex. She said the hardest part was facing everyone after. I hadn't thought about that. The idea of facing our friends, our extended family, filled me with dread. But then I caught sight of my new reflection, shorter hair, tear-stained cheeks, but eyes bright with determination. We'll face them together, I said, squeezing Kelly's hand. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Linda. We need to talk. Meet me at the cafe on 5th at noon. My stomach churned. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to cut all ties with that part of my life. But another part, the part that had found the strength to stand up to Mike, knew this was a conversation I needed to have. I showed Kelly the text. What do you think? She studied it for a moment, then looked at me with a mix of concern and pride. I think you should go, Mom. You deserve answers. I nodded, feeling a strange calm settle over me. This meeting with Linda could go 1,000 different ways, but for the first time in years, I felt ready to face whatever came my way. As I got ready to leave, I caught my reflection one last time. The woman staring back at me wasn't perfect. Her hair was uneven, her eyes tired, but I was strong. But she was ready. I was ready. The cafe bustled with the lunch crowd as I sat across from Linda, my soon-to-be ex-mother-in-law, and the woman who'd been having an affair with my husband. The irony wasn't lost on me. Emily, Linda began, her voice low. I know you must hate me. I stared at her, my emotions a tangled mess. Hate is too simple a word for what I feel, Linda. She nodded, looking down at her untouched coffee. I understand, but there's something you need to know about Mike, something that might affect your divorce settlement. My guard went up immediately. What are you talking about? Linda took a deep breath. Mike's in debt, serious debt. He's been gambling, Emily, for years. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Gambling, but how? Where did he get the money? He's been dipping into his retirement fund, Linda explained, her face grim. And he took out a second mortgage on your house without telling you. My mind reeled. Our house, the home where I'd raised Kelly, where I'd poured my heart and soul, was at risk. How much? I managed to ask. Linda slid a piece of paper across the table. The number written on it made my blood run cold. This can't be right, I whispered. I'm afraid it is, Linda said softly. Emily, I'm so sorry for everything. The affair, keeping this from you. I thought I loved him, but Mike, he's not the man either of us thought he was. I barely heard her apology, my mind racing with the implications. If this was true, the divorce settlement I'd been counting on, the fresh start I'd been planning for Kelly and me, was in jeopardy. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. Emily, we need to talk. New information has come to light about Mike's finances. Call me ASAP. I stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over my chair. I have to go. Linda reached out, grabbing my wrist. Emily, wait, there's more. I paused, dreading what else she could possibly tell me. Mike, he's planning to contest the divorce. He's going to claim you were emotionally abusive, that you drove him to the affair. He's going to try to take everything, Emily. The room spun around me. I yanked my arm free and stumbled out of the cafe, gasping for air. On the sidewalk, I fumbled with my phone, dialing my lawyer with shaking hands. As it rang, I caught sight of my reflection in a store window. My new, shorter haircut, a symbol of my newfound strength, seemed to mock me now. Emily? My lawyer's voice came through. I'm glad you called. We need to discuss. I know, I cut him off. I just found out about the debt, the gambling, all of it. What do we do? He sighed heavily. It's not good, Emily. Mike's financial situation complicates things significantly, and if he contests the divorce as he's threatening to. He can't win, I said, my voice rising with panic. He can't take everything. I have proof of the affair. Infidelity doesn't carry as much weight as you might think in court, he explained gently, and if he can make a case for emotional abuse. I leaned against the building, feeling like the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. Everything I'd fought for, the future I'd envisioned for Kelly and me, was slipping away. Just then, I saw Mike across the street, emerging from a pawn shop. Our eyes met, and a slow, cruel smile spread across his face. He knew he had the upper hand. In that moment, something inside me snapped. The fear and panic gave way to a white-hot rage. I'd let Mike control me for too long, let him make me feel small and worthless. No more. Emily? My lawyer's voice sounded distant. Are you still there? What do you want to do? I watched Mike saunter away, his arrogance palpable even from a distance. My jaw clenched, determination flooding through me. Fight, I said, my voice steel. We fight with everything we've got. I won't let him win. Not this time. As I ended the call, I knew the real battle was just beginning. But for the first time since this nightmare started, I felt truly ready. Mike might think he held all the cards, but he was about to learn that he'd underestimated me for the last time. The bridal shop's bell chimed as Kelly twirled in her wedding gown, her face radiant with joy. My heart swelled with pride and love, momentarily pushing aside the storm of the ongoing divorce battle. Mom, what do you think? Kelly asked, her eyes sparkling. I blinked back tears. You look absolutely beautiful, sweetheart. As Kelly changed back into her regular clothes, my phone buzzed. It was my lawyer. With trembling fingers, I answered. Emily, we've hit a snag, he said, his voice grave. Mike's lawyer is pushing for a larger share of your assets, citing your emotional abuse as grounds for compensation. My stomach dropped. But that's ridiculous. He's the one who... I know, my lawyer cut in, but they're presenting a compelling case. We need to consider settling, Emily. The longer this drags on, the more you stand to lose. I ended the call, feeling numb. Kelly emerged from the dressing room, her smile fading as she saw my expression. Mom, what's wrong? I forced a smile. Nothing, honey, just some legal stuff. Kelly's eyes narrowed. Is it Dad? What's he done now? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Mike. We need to talk, for Kelly's sake. I showed Kelly the message, watching her face cloud over. You're not going to meet him, are you? She asked. I sighed. I think I have to, sweetie, for the sake of ending this nightmare. Kelly grabbed my hand. Then I'm coming with you. An hour later, we sat across from Mike in a quiet corner of a local diner. He looked haggard, his eyes darting between Kelly and me. Kelly, he began, his voice hoarse. I'm so sorry for everything. I want to make things right. Kelly's jaw clenched. By trying to take everything from Mom? By lying about her in court? Mike flinched. It's complicated, honey. Your mother. Don't you dare, I cut in, my voice low and dangerous. Don't you dare try to turn her against me. Mike's eyes hardened. Fine, let's cut to the chase. I want to come to the wedding, Emily. It's my right as her father. Kelly stood up abruptly. No, absolutely not. Kelly, please, Mike pleaded. I know I've made mistakes, but... Mistakes? Kelly's voice rose. You cheated on Mom with Linda. You gambled away our future. You're trying to destroy Mom in court. Those aren't mistakes, Dad. Those are choices. Mike's face reddened. Now listen here. No, you listen, I interjected, finding strength in Kelly's words. You've made your choices, Mike. Now live with them. You're not coming to the wedding. You're not getting more than you deserve in the divorce, and you're certainly not going to bully us anymore. Mike's hand slammed on the table. You can't do this to me. I'll fight you every step of the way. You'll what? Kelly challenged. Tell more lies, gamble away more money. Face it, Dad, you've lost, not just the divorce, but us. With that, Kelly stormed out of the diner. I stood to follow her, but Mike grabbed my arm. Emily, please, he begged, his voice breaking. Don't let it end like this. We can start over, be a family again. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd once loved. But then I remembered the years of criticism, the affair, the lies. I gently removed his hand. Goodbye, Mike, I said softly. I hope you find peace. As I walked out of the diner, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The battle wasn't over. There were still legal hurdles to overcome, but for the first time, I truly believed I would win. Outside, I found Kelly leaning against my car, tears streaming down her face. I pulled her into a tight hug. I'm so proud of you, I whispered. Kelly pulled back, wiping her eyes. I'm proud of us, Mom. We're going to be okay, aren't we? I nodded, a genuine smile spreading across my face. Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be more than okay. As we drove home, I realized that this wasn't just about winning the divorce or outsmarting Mike. It was about reclaiming our lives, our happiness. And with Kelly by my side, I knew we could face anything that came our way. The road ahead might be challenging, but for the first time in years, I was excited to see where it would lead us. The gentle breeze carried the scent of roses as I stood in the garden, watching Kelly and her new husband, James, share their first dance as a married couple. The soft melody of their chosen song drifted through the air, and I found myself swaying slightly, a contented smile on my face. It had been a year since the divorce was finalized, a year of rebuilding and rediscovering myself. The legal battle had been brutal, but in the end, truth prevailed. Mike's lies unraveled in court, and his attempts to paint me as the villain backfired spectacularly. The judge saw through his deceit, and I walked away with a fair settlement and my dignity intact. As the dance ended, Kelly caught my eye and beckoned me over. I made my way through the crowd of well-wishers, accepting hugs and congratulations along the way. Mom, Kelly beamed, pulling me into a tight embrace. Can you believe it? I'm married. I laughed, blinking back tears of joy. I can, sweetheart. You and James are perfect for each other. James grinned, wrapping an arm around Kelly's waist. We have something for you, Emily, he said, reaching into his pocket. Kelly's eyes sparkled with excitement as James pulled out a small, beautifully wrapped package. Go on, Mom, open it. With trembling fingers, I unwrapped the gift. Inside was a stunning silk scarf, its vibrant colors shimmering in the late afternoon sun. It's beautiful, I breathed, running my fingers over the soft fabric. Kelly stepped forward, gently taking the scarf and draping it around my shoulders. We wanted you to have something special, she said softly. Something to remind you how beautiful and strong you are. I touched the scarf, feeling a lump form in my throat. For so long, I had let Mike's cruel words about my thinning hair define me. But now, surrounded by love and acceptance, I realized how far I'd come. Thank you, I whispered, pulling them both into a hug. This means more than you know. As the reception continued, I found myself by the garden's edge, lost in thought. The setting sun cast a warm glow over the festivities, and I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me here. Penny for your thoughts? A familiar voice asked. I turned to see Carol, my former mother-in-law, standing beside me. Our relationship had been strained during the divorce, but we'd found our way back to each other in the months that followed. Just thinking about how much has changed, I replied honestly. Carol nodded, her eyes kind. You've come so far, Emily. I hope you know how proud we all are of you. I smiled, touching the scarf around my neck. I'm proud of myself, too. For the first time in years, I feel free. As if on cue, the band struck up a lively tune. Carol grinned, holding out her hand. Care to dance? Laughing, I took her hand and let her lead me to the dance floor. As we twirled and swayed, I caught sight of Kelly and James, their faces alight with love and joy. My heart swelled with hope for their future, a future free from the pain and doubt that had clouded my own marriage. Later, as the night wound down and guests began to depart, Kelly found me once more. Mom, she said, her voice soft and serious. I just wanted to say thank you for everything, for showing me what real strength looks like. I cupped her face in my hands, overwhelmed with love for this incredible young woman. "Oh, Kelly, you've been my strength through all of this. I couldn't have done it without you." As we embraced, I realized that this wasn't just Kelly's new beginning. It was mine too. The road ahead was full of possibilities, and for the first time in years, I was excited to explore them. The last of the guests departed, leaving just our closest family and friends. As we gathered to see Kelly and James off on their honeymoon, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The scarf around my neck fluttered in the breeze, a reminder of the love and support that surrounded me. Looking up at the star-filled sky, I made a silent wish for Kelly's marriage, for love, respect, and the strength to weather any storm. And as I watched the newlyweds drive away, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, stronger and more resilient than ever before. The chapter of my life with Mike had closed, but a new one was just beginning. And this time, I was the author of my own story.